I'm good.
Okay, I'm going to bring this meeting of the Dixon Unified School District Board of Trustees to order. Before we go into closed session, seeing no public present, there will be no comment on closed session, so I will adjourn to closed session and return after. Thank you. Okay, we are back from closed session. We have no announcements from closed session, so we will now start the business meeting. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, thank you. Roll call. Lloyd?
Present.
Melissa?
I'm here.
Jewel? Probably have to unmute, Jewel.
Got it.
All right.
Here.
Catlin?
Here.
Okay, all board members are present. Notice to public. Persons wishing to speak to agenda items may present their written request at this time. While the written request is optional, those making a written request will be recognized first. Persons wishing to introduce a subject not on the agenda may also present the request at this time. The board president will recognize you for the discussion at the appropriate time. Non-scheduled agenda items will be introduced under section 10 on the agenda. Speakers may be limited to 5 minutes per topic at the discretion of the board president. In accordance with board bylaw 9324B, the district may tape, film, stream, or broadcast any open board meeting. The recording or broadcast may capture images or sounds of those attending the meeting. Any district recording may be erased or destroyed 30 days after the meeting. Recordings made at the direction of the board during a meeting are public records and upon request shall be made available for inspection by members of the public on district equipment without charge. So for anyone who has not participated in one of these Zoom meetings before, the actual comment section or chat is disabled, correct, Mark?
That is correct.
Okay, so you really can't make a written request, but what we will do as we go along, when you want to make a comment or ask a question at the appropriate time, please use the reaction button down below to wave your hand, and Mark will then unmute people to ask questions. Okay, let's get started. Brian, do we have any recognition of guests and presentations?
No, we do not this evening.
Correspondence?
None, thank you.
Okay, consent agenda. Do we have any board questions or comments on the consent agenda? Seeing none, I would like to move to pull H, M, and O from the consent agenda just to be discussed briefly, if we may. I'll make a motion to do that. Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you. A motion and a second to pull H, M, and O. Roll call vote. Lloyd?
Aye.
Jewel?
Aye.
Melissa?
Aye.
Catlin?
Aye.
Okay, and I'm aye as well. Thank you. Okay, do we have any public comments on the consent agenda? Seeing none, Mark?
There is a comment. Is it about the consent agenda?
Why don't we unmute them and see?
I will unmute. Let me do it, please. Thank you.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Jill.
We have comments for the public comment section, but do I guess, do I need to raise my hand right now or just wait?
No,
till
that's okay.
item 10?
When we get to public comment, raise your hand again, and then Mark will unmute you at that time, okay?
All right, thank you.
Great, thank you. Okay, so do we have a motion to approve the consent agenda less H, M, and O items?
So move.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Roll call vote. Lloyd,
Aye.
Jewel,
Aye.
Melissa,
Aye.
Catlin,
Aye.
and I'm I as well. Consent agenda is approved, less HM and O. Okay, I'll speak first since I asked for them to be. My only concern, I just wanted to ask, and Brian, I know we discussed this kind of indirectly before, but I know these are things we need to do. I don't have any problem with that. My concern is going into the school year not knowing if we're going to be in person, distance learning, combination of both, or we go back and we end up having to go distance learning again. I'm concerned whether we've addressed any of our contracts with those other parties or vendors. What happens under the contracts if their services can't be utilized because we're doing distance learning?
Sure. And actually, I'm going to ask Kim Parrott to join in, since two of these contracts are for special education services. And I'm just remembering, as I'm asking Kim to join in, that I think we need to hold off on approval on one of these because there was an issue with the price. I'll have Kim speak to that as well. So for those who don't have an agenda in front of them, what Luke asked to be pulled are three contracts. One is for the 2021 school year for the Destination College Advising Corps. And this is a program that we've been contracting with. It's through the University of California Office of the President. And it provides a UC graduate to come in and offer supplementary services in terms of college readiness, preparedness, and especially support for seniors with application processes and such. And if I remember correctly, our cost on this is about $40,000 per year. And in essence, what Luke's question boils down to is, what if we're in a situation where we can't provide the services because of school being closed, something along those lines. I did have a chance to check on this one a little bit, Luke. And we did have DCAC continue some of the services through the remainder of the school year after we closed. And obviously, just like everything else, it wasn't the same as when the DCAC staff person was on campus 5 days a week and able to meet with students individually and all those types of things. There were some group sessions and such. What I was told was confidence that services could continue there, even if we were in a period of closure. However, that DCAC is flexible about if there is a closure and it results in a reduction of services needed, that there would be the ability to renegotiate those terms at that point in time. So I was comfortable with what I heard on DCAC on two levels. One, that they can continue services even while closed, and two, that there is the ability to look at terms should something happen. So.
Okay, so if we have need for those services virtually, they can do that.
They did, yeah.
We
They did
would
this
just-
spring and can again, yeah.
Okay, so we would just need to make sure all of our students that want those services are aware of how to
Absolutely,
do that.
yeah, yeah.
And was this just a phone conversation, or do you have anything in writing from them?
Nothing in writing at this point in time, no, just a phone call.
Okay, maybe just even an email or something in writing to say, we're gonna be flexible with you.
Sure,
I
okay.
just don't want us to get stuck paying for services we can't use.
Yep,
Okay, and-
understood.
okay.
All right,
and
Kim,
what ab-
Kim, are you in the meeting now?
Yes, I'm right here.
Hi,
All
Kim.
right. So, Kim, which of these two contracts do we need to table for tonight? Is it?
The SPG contract, I had changed, not going to be getting an SLPA from them this year, and they included it on the contract, so they needed to send me a revised contract. We have the other contracts are accurate, School Steps and School Consulting Incorporated. And speech services are and have been being provided by distance learning through teletherapy because we have to because of the IEPs. So even if we are distance learning or whatever we are, those services will continue. They have
Okay.
to.
Yeah.
As I said, they have already been going on. And so those are the speech contracts that are before you. And I will have the other contract at the next board meeting, but I could not bring that before you without it being totally accurate.
Okay, so which one was it, Kim? Which item?
SPG, Speech Pathology Group.
Did we actually already pull that? I'm not seeing that one listed.
I don't
You
see
may
that
have
on.
because
Okay.
they were very late getting me their
Okay.
contract, and when I
Alright, so
got
that-
it, it was
yep.
incorrect.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so the three we pulled is the MOU, which is H, speech therapy M, and school steps O, and those
We
are all.
have, we have their contracts.
Okay. Do we have any board questions or comments on any of that? Seeing none. Any public questions or comments on any of those three? Okay, do we have a motion to approve items H, M, and O?
So move.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Roll call vote. Lloyd,
Aye.
Jewel,
Aye.
Melissa,
Aye.
Catlin,
Aye.
and I'm I as well. Thank you. Okay. Stakeholder communications. I had an email from Tad saying that the Citizens Oversight Committee would not have any report tonight. So employee association reports, do we have any?
Seeing none.
Okay, any parent association reports?
I'm seeing none.
Okay, moving on to item 10, public comment. Persons wishing to introduce a topic within the subject matter jurisdiction of the district and not on the agenda may do so at this time. By law, subjects not on the agenda cannot be acted upon by the board, except to briefly respond, clarify, or refer to staff for review and presentation at a future meeting. Comments may be limited to 5 minutes per person to a maximum of 25 minutes per topic, unless extended by the board president. Comments are to be directed exclusively to the governing board, and the board president shall determine who, if anyone, may respond to the comments or questions of the speaker. So now would be the time to raise your hand if you'd like to make a comment or have a question. Okay, Mark, I see we have a thumb up there. I
Yes.
misread you.
Annabelle, that's the wrong one. There should be a hand up, but we'll go ahead and let you in. That's a like. So Annabelle is first.
You've got to unmute. Oh, there we go.
There we go.
Okay, go
Hi.
ahead. Hi.
My name's Annabelle Rubio. I just graduated Dixon High School just this last week. Sorry, there's a bunch of reverb in here. And this fall I'll be going to UC
Turn off
Berkeley.
the computer next to you.
But
Mute the computer next to you so we can hear you.
oh, sorry, technical difficulties. Can you hear me now?
Mhm.
So I just graduated Dixon High School last week. I'm going to UC Berkeley in the fall, and I turned in 19 community scholarships applications, and I was informed by Dixon High School that none of my scholarship applications were turned into the businesses that were hosting these scholarships. And from just speaking to some community members and some other students, we've learned that most of the businesses have received far less scholarships than they were expecting, and I'm starting to begin to think that I was not the only one who has had this problem. And I don't know what the district is going to do or who's going to take accountability for this, but there needs to be protocol set in place so that this doesn't happen to any students again, because we're just trying to find more money to be able to pay for college.
Anything else you'd like to say, Annabelle?
Her mother would.
Sure, go ahead. I can imagine you would.
Okay. My name is Jill Rubio, and I am Annabelle's mom. And I would like to address the board. I hope you all are in receipt of a copy of the letter that I sent to you all regarding Annabelle. And I just want to say that what happened to her was inexcusable. And we hold the district and the school responsible. And we would just really are curious as to where were the checks and balances. And the principal had said that they had never used that process before due to COVID-19. So we just would like to know, how did this happen? And where were the checks and balances? And we're hoping for some accountability. And we just thought that it would be checked and rechecked. And just as a school board, we're asking that you please follow through with an audit process to ensure that this doesn't happen again. And as Annabelle said, in speaking with several other service organizations such as Seroptimist and Women's Improvement, they received less than half of the scholarship applications that they typically do. So what that just leaves us to think that Annabelle was not the only one. And I would like also for this request, I'd like this to be agendized for the July 2nd meeting.
Okay, anything else?
Her dad is here.
Hi, Dad. Would you like to say something?
I would just like to know what the district's intent is on rectifying this situation.
Okay, thank you. So let me first say I'm sorry this happened. And Annabelle, good luck at Cal. That's really impressive. And I wish you a lot of luck. I agree that we need to make sure this can't happen again. I would like to get more information about what occurred in terms of other reduction of numbers. And I think we need to try to somehow audit this. But Brian, would you like to give some response of a plan on what we can do? We need to come up with a system so this can't happen again. And I agree, I'd like it to be agendized for a later report on how we're going to put checks and balances in place so this does not occur.
Yeah, certainly. And I join Luke in apologizing for this horrible, horrible situation. I've known Annabelle since she was just a young one, and I've watched her grow up, and so proud and happy for her going to Cal. Really a great accomplishment. You should have chosen Davis because
Didn't apply to Davis.
well, that's your mistake, my dear, but it's okay. Cal's all right too.
That's right. UCB.
Well, yes. Let's leave it there, shall we? Anyway, I'm sorry, sweetheart, for this, and I know it's a stress on the whole family. And I did spend 10 or so minutes talking with Grandma and Grandpa the morning of graduation there, and we had a good chat. And just a mistake that can't be made. So I have had a conversation with Ms. Marquez regarding this, who obviously, as a principal of the site, oversees the whole program. And to what degree issues around COVID-19 factored into this, I'm not sure at this point in time. We are in conversation about how to make sure this happens again. And I think the primary thing is that more than one set of eyes or one set of hands needs to be involved in this, and that there be some cross-checking between multiple staff members, right? And your request to see if this happened to any other students this spring is totally valid, and we will follow through on that 100% for sure. So let's make sure Mr. Foster and I set the agenda. Either Ms. Marquez or I, or maybe both of us, will give you guys a call. Maybe we could set up actually a phone call for next week to see, just to talk through exactly what it is that you'd like to make sure that we do, and we can tell you what we can do on our end. And then whether it's for July 2nd or July 16th, we'll figure that out as we get the work done. But I do commit us to working to see just that this doesn't happen again. And I know, Annabelle, there was a little bit of a scramble right after this news broke, and you were able to receive several scholarships, and I'm happy about that, but I know it's not the same thing. I just want to acknowledge that's not the same thing as having been in the mix and being selected through the full process, and perhaps receiving more scholarship awards than you did. So I thank the community groups who responded to this mess. There's Dixon for you again, right? And so thank you to those groups. But we got to do better. We got to do better, and we will work with you on making sure that we do. Okay.
So Brian, I don't know how long it's going to take all of you guys to come up with a checks and balance system on this. Is the first July meeting feasible as bringing this back up, or should you guys talk about it, get in touch with them, and then we'll set it for a different?
Yeah, we'll see exactly what we need to. I think establishing the process is quick and easy. Quite honestly, it's whatever kind of research has to be done on were other students impacted this year or not. That's the one that might take a little bit more time. But just identifying, it's not a complicated process to double, triple check this. There's staff available at the site to be able to do that. So that's a quick turnaround. Luke, we can work through our weekly meetings, keep you informed of this, and certainly for next Friday, give you an update on our conversation with the Rubios.
Okay. Okay. And Annabelle, again, I'm sorry for this, and good luck at Cal. I'm sure you'll do a great job there.
Thank you.
Okay, do we have more public comment?
Not at this time, sorry.
Yeah, I'm gonna just make a note about, and Mark, we've got chat going on. Maybe it's disabled now.
Chat is turned off, and we just maxed out at 100. Our new version starts next week.
Oh gosh, okay, thank you. I was hoping we were already at the full wide open. There is an issue going on in the group, and I want to acknowledge it. I don't remember if it was the last meeting or the one before at the start of the meeting. I spoke about issues going on in our society right now related to racial equity and treatment of all groups within our society. Applied that to Dixon Unified in some of the comments. We have a mission statement that says all students, and that means all families as well by extension. And there are members of the audience, those present for the meeting, who are concerned right now that one of the people attending the meeting is displaying a Confederate flag along with their login. And the chat was a request for that image to be taken down, and that request was denied or rejected. And I didn't think it was right to let that exchange pass without commenting on it. I would respectfully request, out of consideration and respect for everyone in this meeting and beyond, that image be taken down. At the same time, I can't require that, and neither can the governing board. But I think just taking the moment to go on record saying that we do respectfully request that be taken down. Like I say, chat is off. This is not going to become an issue to dominate this board meeting at this point in time. I've spoken on behalf of the district as the superintendent of schools. I hope people who do object see that that's as much as I'm able to do at this point in time. This is a public meeting. We can't kick anybody out. But I just wanted to reflect that I saw the concern and wanted to address it.
Thank you for commenting on that, Brian, and also ask that individual politely to please consider taking that down at the request of the district. Okay.
Luke,
I
Yes.
do have,
Lloyd.
sorry, sorry, Smart.
Yvonne McCluskey has been raising her hand, and I don't know if she doesn't. I think she'd like to make a comment of some kind.
Okay.
I mean, I can
Mark,
see her raising her hand here.
thank you, Lloyd. Mark, can you?
I'm unmuted now.
Thank you. Go ahead.
My name is Yvonne McCluskey. Excuse me. Ray and I are the grandparents of Annabelle. I do have a suggestion that I would like the board to take into consideration for addressing this not happening again. I believe the high school or the district where it comes from can post on the computer all of the organizations that are offering scholarships, and then the school needs to back away, not be involved anymore. Leave it up to the students that are applying. They're of age. They can get help from their parents. Let them apply, let them get all the information in a packet available, and let them mail it, hand deliver it to each individual community organization. That way, I believe it would keep this from happening again. It would get the district out of the picture, because this is a nightmare and it should have never happened. But Annabelle has suffered. She didn't get a fair shake, and it's totally, totally inexcusable. And for one person to say it's not the district's fault that works for the district is totally inexcusable. And it is unprofessional. And we're just asking for what's fair. If it be financially that the district, fine. But Annabelle, and I know of one other person that did not get their application sent in. I know that. And I'm acquainted with a lot of different service organizations. Their applications are less than half of what they normally receive. So I will applaud you and beg you to follow through with this, because there might be kids out there that don't even know, and their parents don't even know, and they didn't have a chance. If it hadn't been for Ray being in Rotary and being on the board and knowing what to do, and we are very involved with Annabelle in her life, and it would have never happened. And I don't want to see another child go through this. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Yvonne. And your suggestion is one that we'll certainly put in the mix as to how to move forward on this. Thank you.
We do have a public comment.
Oh,
Okay.
Yvonne wants to,
Add something else.
yeah.
My son, Michael, was on the school board here in Dixon when he lived here. He had to resign because they moved up to Red Bluff. And Michael suggested that. So I have a lot of trust and faith that he does know. Thank
Sure.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Mark, next.
Susie, are you ready?
Yes, I'm ready. Hi, good evening, school board and Superintendent Dolan. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Susie Altieri. I am the SCIU president, and I know I'm a little late to the report. I'm just all new to this, but I just wanted to introduce myself, and we have a new leadership team this year, and we're representing over 130 classified members. We're actively working with our management team on a lot of uncharted territory, on a lot of issues that we're working through. So we're going to continue to do that, and we're closely watching and following our budget, and engaging in a lot of dialogue right now. I think this is our last school board meeting of the year. And as we're wrapping up our 2019-20 school year, I want to thank all of our classified members who continue to support our sites and our students and our administrators. and they're amazing employees. So many of us have been here for many, many years. So you have a lot of dedicated employees out there. And continue to work through this COVID, and whether it's providing our students with meals and with sanitizing and with multiple things, keeping all of our business at hand going and moving forward. So just wanted to say good evening to everyone, and we're going to continue to work in the best interest of our members.
Okay, thank you, Susie.
Thank you, Susie.
Thank you.
Any other public comments?
Seeing none at this time.
Okay, then we will move on to information, discussion, and action, 11A. And I will open the public hearing on the 2020-2021 budget.
Luke, real quick.
Yeah.
I have received a couple text messages saying that people can't get in to the meeting. And so I don't know how many people are trying to get into the meeting. Who can't? Has anyone else gotten any information?
Yes, we said a few minutes ago, we reached our 100 amount about 10 minutes ago. I do not know how many are out there. As someone drops off, I can let somebody else in, but it doesn't show me. Next week, we should be able to get to 300.
Someone just dropped off, so you should be able to let someone in now.
And
Go ahead. Go ahead, Catlin.
I was just going to say, and so Brian, what does that mean in terms of if we're in our regular world and we're in the city council chambers and folks can't get in just to watch the public meeting? So what does that mean in terms of this meeting then?
Yeah, so I can speak definitively to the other meeting, the in-person meeting. There is a fire marshal determined capacity for the council chambers. And over the years, there have been instances where people were asked to leave because the number of people in the room was exceeded. It's been a few years at least since that happened, probably budget cut time before. So I know what happens there. I know the city had the same issue with regards to a meeting maybe about a month ago where they were also dealing with the 100-person cap. I am not certain what this means with regards to the Brown Act. Your question surfaces the concern that since everybody is not able to access the meeting, is there any kind of issue with regards to any action taken tonight? I think we have the responsibility to acknowledge that out loud. I have not seen anything in any of the materials I get through any of the public agencies related to this issue of having a limited capacity on the ability to join the meeting. We do know that there is a finite number of people who can get into the council chambers. At the same time, the ability to watch the meeting exists because it is broadcast on local cable and streamed through the internet. No input from watching on TV or being on the internet through Granicus. So I think the question brings a legitimate concern forward, Catlin, and unfortunately, I don't know the answer to it here this evening.
So can people watch through Granicus right now?
No, Granicus is based in the council chambers, so we're not able to do it that way.
So at this point, we would move forward with the meeting, unsure of what our process would be, and then find a cure if there was, if we were potentially in violation, which we don't know if we are, but we would have to cure that if we were found out later that we were in violation.
Correct. Yeah, I think that is the advisable step to take. And on the front end, acknowledging that we may have to go back and redo any action items that are held tonight. That is the remedy that is required if there is any kind of Brown Act issue regarding an action item. You can hold information discussion items without there being a remedy needed. So that would be my advice tonight, is that we do proceed with as normal but also make sure that we are aware that we may have to hold a special meeting next week to retake actions if it's determined that this is a Brown Act issue.
So Brian, let me ask, are there any of the action items on for tonight that we can hear the presentation but not take action on until the next meeting?
Yes, I think all of them would apply. We need to have our budget adopted, and Monique, jump in if I misspeak. We need to have our budget adopted and into the hands of the County Office of Education by June 30th. The resolutions related, the 3 resolutions, the commitment to implement ongoing budget reductions, the temporary interfund borrowing, and reserving the right to address employee compensation reductions. We also have, we do not have a hard deadline that tonight would impact. And
Trying to, but it was something.
that
Your internet.
is Nick's. Nick, do you have a deadline on the COVID operations report or not?
Yes, it has to be the same night as the budget.
Okay, all right. So what we, so timeline wise, we could hold a meeting next week and repeat items if necessary. I still do suggest, with the full acknowledgement that we might have to redo items, that we proceed through this meeting and then get legal advice. This might be county counsel actually, rather than our private legal explaining what options we need to follow.
Okay.
Okay.
Catlin, anything else on that?
I think that's it. Thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate the question, Catlin. Thank you.
Thank you for bringing that up. Okay, then I'll open the public hearing on the 2020-2021 budget. Monique?
Good evening, President Foster, members of the board, Superintendent Dolan. This evening, I am presenting the adopted budget for this upcoming school year. In a moment, I will share my screen. Mark, do I have the ability to share?
It is on.
Okay. It is forthcoming. There we go. Before I begin this presentation, I absolutely want to acknowledge the immense amount of work that went into the development of this budget. The district began developing the adopted budget in January, right after the first interim. We had several conversations and meetings with district staff and with management. And then of course, the pandemic hit, which required all of us to pivot. And I think we did so to the best of our ability. And so I want to acknowledge the collective work that went into the creation of what we're presenting this evening. I also want to thank ParkCorp, our consultant, with their work and dedication to creating this particular budget. This section of my presentation is the public hearing. What's a little bit different about tonight's presentations is typically we have one day where we have a public hearing and then another day where we, at the next meeting, we take action. But because of the school closure and the pandemic and the governor's executive order, we are able to have these meetings on one night because typically the budget is presented with the LCAP and the LCAP has been delayed until December. So that uncoupled having to have them together. And so we have the opportunity to have the public hearing and take action on it if the board agrees at one meeting. So you'll see me talking about this particular budget twice this evening. Okay, let's get into the budget. So at every budget presentation, I share the annual budget cycle. And we are at the beginning of a new budget cycle, and we are at the adopted budget in June. An overview of what I'll review this evening are, of course, the legal requirements, some core messages that we need to keep in mind when we're looking at this particular budget. I'll summarize the adopted budget, share multi-year projections, and talk about our next steps. The legal requirements of the adopted budget is that the budget needs to reflect the projected revenues and expenditures for the next fiscal year. It's reviewed by the Solano County Office of Education and the California Department of Education. The County Office of Education is responsible for approving, conditionally approving, or disapproving our budget based upon whether or not they believe we'll be able to meet our fiscal obligations. So core messages. The first core message is related to the assumptions that went into the creation of this budget. There's not a lot of information, but a lot of speculation about what the overall California state budget will be. However, we have based this particular budget on the governor's May revision, which is normal. This is what we typically do when we're creating the adopted budget. In that budget, the governor proposed a 0% COLA and a resulting effect of a negative 7.92 reduction to our local control funding, also known as LCFF, for next school year. The governor also proposes deferrals of our cash in April and June. We have also added in that we are going to pay 25% of our certificate of participation, also known as COP payments, via the general fund. The next core message is related to our enrollment. We are still projecting a decline in our enrollment, but anticipate stabilization in 2022-23. However, we don't know what the effect of COVID-19 is going to have on our enrollment, and in subsequent budget projections, we will make sure that we update our enrollment figures and our projections related to whatever the reality is at that particular time. Another core message is that the governor proposes relief to our pension costs. We'll have that relief in the coming year. However, those pension costs will eventually continue to rise, and that is an obligation for our district that we have to pay for retirement for our employees. Next, the core message comes from Solano County Office of Education. These are messages that they shared with districts, and these are things that we need to keep in mind when we're creating a long-range plan for our budget. First and foremost, as I've mentioned at the past few budget updates, is that the economic effect of the COVID-19 pandemic is still unknown. We hope that we will get federal assistance, but we just don't know if that's going to come and give us relief within our budget. And even though we don't know what the pandemic is how it's going to affect us, and we don't know whether or not we're going to have federal assistance, which could provide us relief, we still need to make sure that we identify and implement reductions and take action to balance revenues with expenditures. The last core message is that we need to have prudent reserves to afford you the opportunity to make thoughtful decisions about any budget adjustments that we may need now and in the future. Now I'd like to summarize our adopted budget. So this slide and the subsequent slides will show our projections for unrestricted, restricted, and combined, so our total budget. Unrestricted funds and expenditures are related to, or the funds, the revenue is related to monies that we receive that we can spend on anything that we need to spend it on. Our restricted revenue is for specific purposes. So you can think of maybe Title I or our funding that we receive for special education programs. And then of course, our combined column there is our total revenue. Our LCFF, local control funding revenue, is projected to be at $26.9 million. It's important to note that this represents 96% of our revenue for our budget. Also, this $26.9 million is about $3.6 million less than what we received in 1920. Our federal revenue listed here, I want to make note that it does include the one-time CARES funds that we are projected to receive in the governor's proposal. And finally, our total revenues are projected to be $33.4 million. Our expenses. These expenditures are based upon our third interim projections with adjustments for consumer price index and any other anticipated expenses that we have identified for next year. The salaries and benefits also include the reductions in personnel that were approved by the board in February. Our salaries and salaries and benefits are projected to be $28.9 million. I also want to make sure that I make note that for unrestricted, that monies that we can use for any purposes that we need, the salaries and benefits are projected to be $21.4 million, and that's 86% of our unrestricted funding. Our operational costs, which includes the books and the supplies and the things that we need to be able to provide a great education to our students, are projected to be a total of $7.9 million. And our total expenditures are projected to be $36.9 million. Next, I'd like to discuss our net increase or decrease to our expenditures. To our financial situation. So we project that overall, we are going to be deficit spending by $3.4 million. One great piece of information is that we do not project that we will have to contribute to the cafeteria fund next year. We'll continue transferring money from the unrestricted fund to the restricted fund to help support our special education programs. And our net decrease to our fund balance is projected to be $3.4 million. So where does this leave us? Our fund balance is projected to be completely eliminated for our unrestricted funds. And we project that the end of next year, without any adjustments, we will only have $76,000 in our ending fund balance. And we will have a negative 1.86 reserve for economic uncertainties, also known as REU. I want to take us back for just a moment to one of our core messages that said we needed to have prudent reserves. Obviously, with the budget as presented this evening, it doesn't afford us to have prudent reserves. It doesn't afford us to have sufficient reserves. For a district our size, we should have a minimum of 3% REU to help us to plan for economic uncertainties, which right now we are in an economic uncertainty. That's what those reserves are there for. Now I'd like to move to our multi-year projections, and unfortunately, the picture doesn't get any prettier. I wanted to focus this evening on our multi-year projections strictly for our unrestricted funds. In the board agenda, it has information for all of the funds, but because we need to focus on our unrestricted funding because we can use those for any purposes, tonight I wanted to focus on our MYP for unrestricted. As you can see, our revenues are projected to decline. Our expenses are expected to increase. As a result, our contribution to our fund balance, it's going to get dire. We will not be able to contribute to our fund balance. And then of course, our ending fund balance will get lower, and our reserve for economic uncertainties will continue to decrease. So in summary, and what's our next steps? So the next steps is we need to find out what the state is going to say and what the state's going to do related to the budget. The state budget will be enacted on July 1. At that time, we will review the information and make any revisions as needed and come back to you in August with a 45-day revise based upon what we learn in July. However, now we need to identify reductions to our expenses. We need to begin to create a budget stabilization plan. Even though we don't know if the picture is going to be better or even potentially worse come July 1, what we do know is that even before COVID hit, our district was certified negative last December at our first interim. In March, we were certified as qualified. But if you recall, in those projections in March, we were okay for the next couple years, but our net ending fund balance, our reserve for economic uncertainties, was continuing to decline if we did not implement a budget stabilization plan and really take note of our expenditures. And so one of our next steps is to ensure that we are identifying reductions to our expenses no matter what we learn in July 1. So this concludes the public hearing section of my presentation. The next step, just as a reminder, after the adopted budget, as I've just shared, we have the adopted state budget. And then, as I also just shared, in August, I will be back with you for any revisions to our budget based upon what we learn in July. So at this time, I'm available to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you, Monique. Any board questions? I'm just curious. Obviously, we could go into lots of discussion on how depressing this is. But I'm just curious, after we talked a lot about the cafeteria fund and the problems we were having there, how we're getting by not giving anything from the general fund to the cafeteria fund.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Part of the analysis with the cafeteria fund, one of the first things that I noted and spoke with Jesse and Brian about, and the rest of the team, was how, what costs were charged to that particular fund. And I was able to identify that there were some charges to that fund that needed to be revisited. And so that was one of the big elements related to that. Also, if you recall, earlier this year, Jesse had negotiated a new contract for our milk. That was implemented mid-year, and that is having a significant effect on our expenses for next year. So I would say those are two of the major changes that will affect the budget next year. I'm also working very closely with Jesse on getting better prices for our program. And then finally, with the discontinuing of the after-school program, that also ended up decreasing our costs.
Okay. Now, you mentioned the potentially negative reserve if these assumptions that you're using are actually what happens. And there is negotiation going on the state, right? So that's why you said we're going to come back after it's actually passed. But could you expand a little bit? You mentioned 3%, why we need to have a 3% reserve. Could you expand on that for people? Why 3% is an important number?
Yes. So 3% reserve is like I said, it's the minimum. And that reserve is there to help us to ensure that foundationally we can pay our employees should we have a situation like COVID. Without having a sufficient reserve, then if we were in this particular situation and did not have that additional funding from the state, then we may not have been able to pay our employees, pay our bills, and in essence, we would be bankrupt.
And that 3% is a legally required reserve, right? That doesn't mean that's enough. I mean,
that's correct. That's correct. So that is guidance from the Department of Education. And very importantly, for districts are encouraged to have a 17% reserve to really be really prepared as best they can for economic uncertainties.
okay. Any other board questions or comments before we go to public comment? Okay, seeing none, let's open this up to public comment.
And seeing none.
Okay. Brian, anything you want to add on that?
Yeah, please. Thank you, Mr. Foster. I want to try to give public a chance there, and certainly after I'm done, if there's anybody who needs to share anything. So this is by far the worst budget, proposed budget that I've seen in my time as a district level administrator. That's now 14 years. The same is true of all of my colleagues in Solano County who this week or next are also presenting their proposed budgets to their boards for approval. We are all in the same unfortunate position of building these budgets and proposing them to our boards and sharing them with our communities based on a proposal made by the governor in the middle of May. And what we know right now is that there are rather intense negotiations going on in Sacramento between the legislators and the governor because on the 15th of June, just at the start of the week, the legislature approved a budget which came very close, if not all the way, to keeping education whole in California in the 2021 school year. So we may end up significantly better off in the 2021 budget year than this budget projects. We may not. We may not. We have the fiscal situation is no different than the virus situation in that there are many unknowns, a huge number of variables, and everything is changing very rapidly. So we are presenting this budget tonight with the expectation that there will be some significant changes in the assumptions behind this budget. People need to understand that we will be back with a revised budget that will reflect what happens in Sacramento over the next 2 weeks, 2 to 3 weeks, thereabouts, if they continue to make progress there. In the old days, we went sometimes virtually months without getting a budget deal agreed to. There are some provisions now that make that much more difficult to have happen. So this is a horrible budget. And if it were to remain intact, it would cause us to devastate this school district. We're no different than any other district right now in having that expectation. There are districts certainly with significantly more reserves than we have. Those are going to be eaten away in very short order. Should the legislature's approach to the 2021 budget win out to some degree, this coming school year, this 2021 school year, would be fiscally more comfortable. The the ensuing years won't be. It is the ongoing assumption. The basis of an improved budget for this coming school year is federal assistance. Federal assistance is very unlikely to continue beyond this year. So I want to offer the caution that this is a bad, ugly, devastating budget for the district. I want to condition that with, we know these numbers will change. We know that indications are that they will change for the better to some degree, but we do not believe that they will change for the better to a degree that we are still not having to make budget reductions for the coming budget year. And there are several resolutions coming up after the approval of the budget that reflect the demands on us to make reductions beginning this coming school year and ongoing beyond that. So these are extremely difficult times in so many regards. And the pressure on, this is not just school districts right now, cities and counties and other governmental agencies are all dealing with what's going to come in funding from the state to be able to operate successfully. That's not to speak of private business and industry out there, which has its own catastrophic issues going on. But we are monitoring developments every day. We're in frequent contact with County Office of Education regarding their advice and direction for us. And we will be back regularly talking about what the governor eventually signs here and what our impact is. So in short, because I was just long, we're asking for you to approve this budget knowing that it will change, but just asking people to be aware that there's still very difficult days ahead.
Okay, thank you. Any other board questions? Okay, so let's open this up one more time to public comment, see if anyone is prepared to comment or ask a question.
I have Katie up next.
Go ahead.
Okay, I just have a question. I know last time when we talked about this, Melissa had asked about what we saved from having not to pay subs and electricity and all those expenses at school. I didn't know if that was in on the budget and I just missed it, or if that hadn't been. I know last time you guys didn't have a number of what we were saving from not having to pay those salaries and stuff.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, that kind of cut out a little. Brian, did you get the question, or does Monique?
I did, yeah. I think what Katie was saying there is in the third interim report, Monique shared a dollar figure of reduced expenditures because of the closure. They were operational costs. And I think what the question was asking is, how are those accounted for in this budget? Right, so Monique, can you speak to that for us, please?
Absolutely. So if I recall correctly, we had about a $700,000 or more savings or reduction in expenditures during our third interim. And this budget was very specifically related and based upon our third interim actual expenditures. I would have to say that if we went back to the third interim presentation, and I don't have the numbers off the top of my head, I would say close to 90 to 80% of the savings that we realized at third interim were related to the school closure.
Yeah, and Katie, let me try to add to that a little bit, and please raise your hand if we don't address your question. That's one-time savings, right? And so in essence, that's some cash that added to fund balance or the restricted or the reserve for economic uncertainties but we only get to count that once in terms of dollars in the bank because those dollars will not be replaced. We're presuming those dollars will not be replaced because we would go back into normal operations. That may change again over time, but the view that we have to take on those is that we cannot count on that savings again the coming year or after that. Did that take care of your question? Okay.
Thank you. More public comment?
I'm seeing none at this time.
Okay, then I'm going to close the public hearing. And we'll move on to 11A2, approval of the 2021 budget.
So before we get into that, I'd just like to share that one of my cabinet members was able to make contact with our legal counsel regarding the question around approving items with a lid on the number of people who could participate in the meeting. He reminded us that there are a number of exemptions that were made to the Brown Act as a result of the COVID-19 closure. And the number of people participating. So we can hold this meeting this way, which you wouldn't be able to do in normal circumstances. But just as there can be a capacity in a physical meeting room, there is no issue if there is a capacity issue with regards to an electronic meeting. So I also went into the law firm's website and found a report summarizing these adjustments to the Brown Act during this period in time. So I'm confident that we are, we're safe in taking these actions. We will still verify that tomorrow, that that's the case. But I just wanted to state that we did do a quick check with legal, and their quicker response was that, yes, it's permissible for us to take these actions tonight under these conditions.
Great, thank you for that. And we will have the cap lifted for the next meeting. Correct?
Yes.
Okay, super. Okay, so item 11A2, approval of the 2021 budget. Do we have any questions or comments on the budget? See none. Any other public questions or comments on the budget?
Seeing none.
Okay, thank you. Do we have a motion to approve the 2020-2021 budget as presented?
I'll move.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Roll call vote. Lloyd?
Aye.
Jewel?
Aye.
Melissa?
Aye.
Catlin?
Aye.
And I'm aye as well. Motion carries. Thank you.
And just very quickly, Monique thanked people for their work on the budget. And I don't want to have her total up the number of hours that she has spent in her chair at her desk working on this, because it would make me feel very guilty. It has been an enormous task for all sorts of reasons that we can all imagine. It's always difficult, but she has really put a huge amount of time and effort into this. And what I can tell you is this is the most thorough, carefully reviewed, carefully developed budget that we have had the board approve here in some time. And I thank Monique for leading that charge. So, Ms. Duvall, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Monique. And on to 11A3, resolution number 20-1630.
Okay. This evening, I'm now presenting Resolution 2016-30. This resolution, in summary, is to formalize the governing board's commitment to implement ongoing budget reductions to maintain our fiscal solvency for the 2021 year and the 2 subsequent years. This is brought forth so that we can start making those steps we need to make to implement a budget stabilization plan so that we can, as the resolution says, move towards and ensure fiscal solvency.
Okay, do we have any board questions on this resolution? Hearing none, do we have any public questions or comments on this resolution 20-1630?
Seeing none at this time.
Okay, do we have a motion to approve resolution 20-1630?
So move.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Resolution, roll call vote. Lloyd?
Aye.
Jewel?
Aye.
Melissa?
Aye.
Catlin?
Aye.
And I'm aye as well. Resolution passes. Thank you. Okay. 11A4, temporary interfund borrowing for cash for 2020, 2021.
Okay, thank you. This resolution is an annual resolution. What it allows is us to have the ability to transfer funds within our district to meet our cash flow needs for our various funds. Typically in school districts, the majority of the movement of cash is between the general fund and the cafeteria fund, because sometimes their payments are delayed, but that is a temporary borrowing that occurs. So I ask for your consideration of this particular resolution.
Okay, thank you. Any board questions? So Monique, just to be clear, you said that we don't think we're going to have to provide any general fund money to the cafeteria fund, but this is just a temporary loan if needed, and then it will be paid back to the general fund.
Yes.
As that example.
Yes, and
Okay.
that is a common occurrence in school districts, just the movement of funds.
Okay, thank you.
And it is, and again, as you stated, it's not a permanent contribution, it's a borrowing. So the cafeteria fund would pay back, or it could even be another fund. For example, because we are having the cash deferrals in this month, the general fund is needing to borrow from a different fund to be able to meet its obligations. And then the general fund will repay that fund.
Okay. Any public questions or comments on this resolution?
Seeing none at this time.
Okay, do we have a motion to approve the resolution regarding temporary interfund borrowing of cash for 2020, 2021?
I'll move.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Resolution, roll call vote. Lloyd?
Aye.
Jewel?
Aye.
Melissa?
Aye.
Catlin?
Aye.
And I'm aye as well. Thank you. Okay, on to 11B, resolution number 20-1627, reserving the right to make 2020, 2021 employee compensation reductions. Cindy.
Yes, thank you, Board President Luke, members of the board, and Superintendent Dolan. I would like to begin this presentation by emphasizing that this resolution is not intended to create additional anxiety or stress with what is already going on with the pandemic, but rather to increase our communication and transparency to the public and to our stakeholders with regards to planning for worst case scenario. Of course, we all hope that things will get better from here, but we must be prepared to have a plan in place based on what we know as of right now. This resolution is brought before the board tonight to ask for direction to notify our stakeholders that we would like to begin conversations and have discussions around addressing the budget deficit. The board has the authority to direct staff to begin the communication process and the responsibility to ensure that the district remains fiscally solvent. Based on what we know as presented during the budget presentation items, more than 80% of the district's budget is in personnel. This resolution addresses all group employees in the district, from unrepresented, administrative, supervisory, confidential, to represented, certificated, and classified employees. Since we have not begun negotiations, this resolution only suggests and offers some considerations as those conversations begin to take place. Those items are listed in the resolution under A through H. However, our labor partners may also be able to come with their own suggestions or ideas as we go through the negotiations process. And that is why total compensation is indefinite at this time. With respect to our represented, certificated, and classified employees, the district will adhere to all the legal requirements of going through the negotiations process and language that is outlined in our collective bargaining agreement. What the board and our labor partners can expect to see at its July board meeting is that the district intends to sunshine the appropriate articles within the contract related to total compensation to formally begin negotiations. At the completion of the negotiations process, labor partners will need to complete the ratification process with its membership, and then the district will take to the board for consideration and approval based on the outcome of negotiations. Of course, as new information becomes available, we will adjust our conversations through negotiations and discussions with all of our employee groups in the district to include our unrepresented employees as well. What I do know is that we are not the only ones having to go through this terrible process, but I am hopeful that we will all be able to get through this together. So tonight, this resolution is before you for consideration, available for any questions you might have.
Okay, thank you. Board questions? So just to be clear, this isn't actually cutting anything at this point.
No, it is not. It is to allow us to communicate and notify our employees that we would like to begin these conversations.
And for everyone watching that may not know, can you, when you say unrepresented, can you explain who you're talking about there?
Yes, unrepresented employees are our confidential employees that are not represented by a union, our management administrators. It also includes Nick, Brian, Monique, and I, who are unrepresented but have an employment contract that will still allow the board to make adjustments.
Okay. So as we go along discussion of the budget and needed reductions, not only will we be having conversations if it's necessary with the unions through negotiation, but you guys that are unrepresented will also be having negotiations, so to speak, discussions with the district.
Yes, we will have discussions with our unrepresented employees as well.
Okay, thank you. Okay, any other board questions or comments? Seeing none, let's go out to public questions and comments.
I have Jill with her hand up.
Go ahead, Jill.
Thank you. I have just a question for clarification and then a comment. I'm sorry, I tried to ask a question when Monique was presenting, so I'm just going to ask a quick clarification. When it says, when the resolution stated that the board can borrow money from different funds, what funds are available that can be borrowed from besides cafeteria? And also, as far as Cindy, thank you so much for your presentation. Difficult times for sure. I'm really kind of stunned because I feel like as a staff, especially those of us who have been with Dixon for a long time, we seem to kind of go through some sort of budget issues for years and years and years now. And we're continued to do, asked to do a harder and harder job, more and more and more. And now again, once more with less and less. And it's really sort of disheartening and discouraging. So, and I know it's hard for everybody. I'm not alone, but I just thought somebody should say that. Thank you.
Thank you, Jill. Monique, are you there? You want to answer that fund question, or Brian?
Can take it real quick. So a couple of the areas that are most readily available, developer fees is one of the primary ones, capital facilities fund, another one, and you're actually allowed to borrow from like Measure Q proceeds, so bond sales. All of those things have to be repaid back into those original sources, obviously. But those are essentially restricted, specialized funds that will help cover a cash shortfall. And again, we know we're going to have those with deferrals happening, regardless of. We know there will be deferrals in this budget experience coming up over the next year. So those are the best examples of things we can borrow.
Are there other funds, or are those the main ones?
Those are the only ones that have a substantial amount of money, enough money, say, to cover a month's payroll, if we were in that significant of an issue. Yeah, anything else is much too small to make use of.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Jill.
Hey, Luke,
Yeah,
can I just ask a quick question about that really quick?
course.
Sorry to
Yeah.
go back. I kind of thought in some conversations though that we agreed that we wouldn't touch Measure Q funds.
No, that's, yeah, thank you, Melissa. That would be the last thing that I would want to do. Absolutely, that would be if we had no other borrowing, internal borrowing capacity available.
Thanks.
Yep.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Next public comment.
I'm seeing none.
Okay, then this is a
So
resolution.
hold on, sorry.
Yeah.
Susie has her hand up.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, thank you. You know, I want to piggyback on to what Jill said. For those of us who have been here for a very, very long time, it is really disheartening that we continue to go through waves of budget problems. And regardless of the COVID, we, as I said, for those who have been here for a very long time, have been through many, many years of ups and downs with in regards to our budget. So it is really disheartening to see that we're in this boat, regardless of how it is, because if it were 5 years ago or 10 years ago or 15 years ago, we are still continuing to somehow get into these situations. And I'm not a budget expert by any means, but learning a little bit as we go about reserves and having that extra funding for these situations. And so I think it makes it really, really hard to understand how we are here again. And it's really hard to have to hear, regardless of whether we're going to move forward and have these conversations in a negotiations manner, which we will continue to do. But, you know, just, I know everyone's feeling the same way. It's very, very tough. Thank you.
Thank you, Susie.
Quick response.
Sorry, I have another comment.
Please, yeah.
Kathleen?
Hi there. This question may be solely for Monique, but I was curious as to what our financial projections would have been had it not been for COVID affecting our budget. When I look at the PowerPoint slide that states that the projected loss for our district in 23-24 is 16 million, I'm curious if we hadn't experienced a pandemic and had that impact our budget so much and so severely, what would our budget have looked like for the next few years?
Monique, I don't know if you can answer that.
I sure can. And I think that's a really great question. And I think it's also something that we have to keep in mind that, as I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, we have really, as a district team, been working very hard on a long-range plan for our budget since January. Since we reviewed our budget and knew that we were headed towards a dire financial situation at that time without COVID hitting. based upon our projections at that time, we would have had a positive ending fund balance through this year and next year and probably the following year. But it's important to note that that ending fund balance was positive, but going down. And that's why I had shared during my presentation that no matter what, whether we are in this situation with COVID or whether we were not in this situation with COVID, we as a district need to create a budget stabilization plan so that we can look forward and protect ourselves for the long run. Unfortunately, with our districts and districts throughout California, the impact, the current impact of COVID is dramatically affecting our expenses. No matter what the state says or what the state does, we know that we have decreased revenue for this year, and we know we have increased expenses this year. And then, and when I say this year, it's 1920, and we know that going into 2021, we will have increased expenses. And so we need to make sure that no matter what happens, we as a district are balancing our revenues with our expenditures and taking a hard look at our reserves so that we can protect ourselves in the future. Does that answer your question?
Yes. Is it okay if I ask a follow-up question?
Sure, go ahead.
Thank you. So Monique, given that you were projecting positive balances for the next few years, did that include continuing to reduce the number of teachers that we have on staff? Did that include projected reductions in our salaries?
Absolutely not. The only projections that it included, and I say absolutely not for future years, that did include the board approved reductions in our personnel cost for this year, this coming year, 2021, and that's all. It's important to note though, that I've said this in our presentations before, $1 saved tomorrow is equivalent to $2 next year, is equivalent to $3 next year. So when we make savings to expenses now, that helps us in the out years. So to answer your question a little more so succinctly, is in the following years, no additional reductions in expenditures were planned.
Okay, does that answer your questions?
Yes, thank you so much.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Monique. Okay, any other public questions?
I'm seeing none.
Okay, so this is a resolution. Do we have
Really
a motion?
quickly, sorry, Luke, really quickly if I can. I want to acknowledge what Jill and Susie said on behalf of the board and the administrative team. There's not a one of us who in any way sits in any comfortable way when we are talking about impacting salaries, potentially impacting salaries and benefits for people, cutting programs, any of those things. You know, we all know we're in a declining enrollment situation, and we made reductions this year because of that, to the largest degree because of that. Some of those were decisions just related to other priorities. Both materials and supplies, and unfortunately laid off both certificated classified staff and eliminated one classified management position. None of us signed up, ran for office to be a part of doing those things, and should this extend, this fiscal crisis that's out there extend because of this virus and the lagging economy, we know this is going to be with us for a while. What we're trying to do with this resolution tonight, in the simplest terms, this connects to what I said about how brutal this budget is, and that we're going to have to make reductions. And we've never done this resolution in the past. This is June. we're trying to tell people that this is that it's possible that we're going to be having to have conversations about reducing salary or benefits. We've never done this in June. We will be notifying people that this is possible. We're also going to be reassuring people, and I think this is the most important takeaway of this, that any reductions, any adjustments, any cuts, anything you want to call it in terms of salary or benefits for employees who are members of the bargaining units requires negotiation. We have no unilateral means to say we're cutting your salary, we're cutting your benefits. It goes through the full negotiations process. The people who don't have that luxury are the unrepresented employees. The board can take action, and what the board commits to through this resolution and through the work I've already done with the unrepresented folks is that there would be dialogue and process around discussion, not at the level of negotiations, but the same kind of process of engaging people in the discussions and the impact. So, as you said it, Luke, this is not approval of cuts. This is the board saying we reserve the right to ask our administrative staff to work with our labor partners if necessary regarding cuts.
Okay, thank you, Brian.
I'm
Okay.
sorry, I have 2 more comments.
Okay, let's go for it.
Laura?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead, Laura.
I'm sorry, but I got in a little bit late to this board meeting because there's a limit of 100. So I apologize.
No problem. Go ahead.
I didn't get to hear all of Cindy's conversation, but I'm just a little concerned about this on the agenda right now. And we're talking about having open conversations with our labor groups. I feel SEIU has been at the table having conversations, but right now we're moving towards a direction of fact-finding. I kind of find that we're starting tomorrow. I kind of find it interesting this being on the board agenda right now. I'm a little concerned about kind of the language of it is a little bit ambiguous. My first thing is the governor has not yet finished bargaining a budget for 2021. So we're moving on something that we haven't even, our governor pretty much hasn't bargained for 2021. The federal funding is still unknown. Fully fund LCFF with a 2.31% cost of living adjustment. Providing an average daily attendance, right now the ADA is hold harmless in 2021. So I'm a little concerned of how this is going to be looked at for the employees that have stuck with this district a long time. And how is this going to impact our district and keeping employees? Because yeah, we are having a problem all over California. But as Monique mentioned, we had problems with our budget before. So, and I think there was a comment about 80% of the budget is employees and benefits. That's kind of like a blanket statement, and most districts' budgets are 85 to 90% of the budget. So I mean that we're in a business of people are our assets in our services. So I'm just could not say something. I'm just looking maybe at a bigger picture on the impact and what this might look like. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Laura. Were you able to get in to hear Brian's comments there at the end?
Well, yes, I did hear Brian saying that, you know, this is going to go to the bargaining units, but I think that needs to be an open conversation, and I don't really think that's been there very well with the bargaining units. So, I mean, of course, we're always going to be at that table bargaining, but that's got to be an open door and on both ends. And is this agenda item in some ways just going to allow to move forward in directions without negotiating?
So that was addressed. This is not a reduction of salaries or benefits. This is not a circumvention of the duty or obligation to negotiate. It's more or less a notice to all the employees, including the non-represented, that reductions could be necessary. Does that answer your
Well,
question?
it does answer the question, but again, so are we more concerned about the underrepresented group on the agenda? Because if we have an open conversation with the bargaining units, that's always on the table, isn't it? Why is this? I guess my question is, why is this an agenda item? I'm just a little confused about that.
Yeah, I'll let Brian correct me if I'm wrong here, but my thought process is, you know, sometimes you hear community members say that the district is not open and clear about what's going on. Things happen last minute. This is an effort to let people know, yes, there are financial problems coming. Yes, we may have to take action. This resolution tonight is not taking any action. It's notifying people of potential action or potential problems. Brian, is that accurate?
Yeah, that's a good capture, Luke, right? If we were not to pass this resolution, we could still pursue everything that is included in the language, right? I told you before, we'd never done this resolution prior to this year. This is an effort to be very clear about what our circumstances are. It's an effort to provide employees notice about the possibilities of this, right? The sequence here of the budget hearing and adoption, the resolution to have a budget stabilization plan in place at the time of the first interim in December, the resolution to have the interfund borrowing, and this resolution to state that the board is explicitly saying they reserve the right to have us negotiate with our unions. It's a logical sequence of actions that we've asked the board to take tonight, intending to show what the fiscal picture is and outline the steps that we're going to have to take in response to that. We don't know what the budget stabilization plan will look like. We don't know what negotiations with our employee groups will look like either. I meant in my earlier comment, actually, Laura made me think about it, to share that the breakdown, 86% of our unrestricted dollars, so those are the dollars that we can do anything with. 86% of our unrestricted dollars are spent on people, salaries and benefits, 86%. When you get to the restricted side, so those are the things that you can only spend the money on certain types of activities, that's 62%, right? And so what are some of the things that make that number lower than the unrestricted? Professional development, materials and supplies, some of those types of things. So it is a total of 78% of our budget is spent on people. But the fact that 86% of our unrestricted dollars are spent on people makes the need when you are in a reduction mode to address salaries and benefits the critical part, right? And again, just to clarify with the issue around unrepresented folks, this resolution in no way protects unrepresented folks. Unrepresented people do not have any basis to negotiate with the board with the district in any formal way. Unilateral action can be taken with regards to unrestricted employees. So I just wanted to try to clarify that point again.
Okay, thank you. Any other public questions?
Yes, Barbara, are you wanting to speak?
If I may, please.
Go ahead, Barbara.
I did send an email to the board members regarding this resolution 2016-27. And I just want to make just another quick comment. If you had not read that email, from my understanding, from what I've heard, this resolution is not needed to continue conversations. If that is the case, then I would ask that we look at some of the wording on this, because at first glance reading, they are reserving the right to make compensation reductions. And when that is the very first line you see on this document, it's not saying, you know, that they're opening the door to make these reductions when they could have already had the discussions. And I'm I'm a little confused as if we've already got the okay, if this does not pass, for them to continue with discussions regardless. You know, why do we need this resolution in the first place?
Okay, thank you, Barbara. I think your comments just kind of answered that question, Brian, previously.
Yeah.
If you feel like you need to add anything, you can.
No, thanks.
Okay, any other public questions or comments?
Yes, Mac is next.
Hi, everyone. I just wanted to ask this for the good of the group. Can you remind us who comprises the budget committee for our district?
The Budget Advisory Committee, you mean, Chantel?
That is correct.
Yeah. So, gosh, we haven't met in a while with this closure. So somebody correct me if I'm wrong. So there are 2 board members who sit on it. There are 2 representatives from the Dixon Teachers Association, 2 representatives from SEIU, 3 parent representatives, and Monique runs the Budget Advisory Committee, and Nick, Cindy, and I sit on it as well. So it includes 4 representatives of employee groups, 3 parents, 2 board members, and then the executive cabinet is there as well.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mac. Okay, any other public comments or questions?
I have Jesse next.
Go ahead, Jesse. Do we have Jesse?
Sorry, Jesse just left the meeting.
Okay, any other questions or comments?
None at this time.
Maybe we should give just a minute and see if he gets back on, maybe disconnected.
We're at 100 right now.
Oh, okay. Well, then this is, seeing no other public comments, this is resolution 20-1627. Do we have a motion to approve this resolution?
I move to approve this resolution.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Roll call vote. Lloyd?
Aye.
Jewel?
Aye.
Melissa?
Aye.
Catlin?
Aye.
And I'm aye as well. Resolution carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Brian, 11C.
Yes, so this is part of our ongoing effort to provide the governing board and community with updates on our planning for reopening of schools for the 2020-2021 school year. Just to review the record real quickly, we've included a COVID-related item at all of our board meetings since March. And about a month ago, we created a structure with the board of identifying 5 broad categories that we were putting our work under. They are the distance learning, the instructional schedules, and programming, the health and safety, communication with parents and community, and then budget. And so these presentations, these evenings, have tended to focus on the teaching and learning component of things, the safety component of things, a little bit about the communication component, and probably the least around the budget. And given the amount of time that Monique had to put in to prepare for the budget and everything else, I told her earlier, I don't think we need to hear anything else regarding the budget from you. We're trying to utilize board subcommittees as a way to keep the board involved and informed, provide us with feedback and ask questions. So there is a board subcommittee on the safety. There's a board subcommittee on the learning issues. There's a board subcommittee on budget, and then the communication one. I have a weekly meeting with the board president and vice president, Luke and Catlin, in which we talk about any of the communication issues that are out there. So what we'll do here tonight is I have a couple things to talk about and introduce just at the start here. We'll then shift it to Mr. Jeremani, who will talk about some of the work involved with the teaching and learning planning. Kim Parrott from Special Ed will add a little bit to that conversation. Mark Monticello will lead us on the discussion of the safety issues. Cindy Nguyen may join into any component of any of these conversations because many of them have implications with regards to human services. And then we will let you guys take questions and comments. And if you want to do the questions and comments kind of by committee group or by topic as we go through, that would be fine as well. So Mark, I'm going to have you set up the opportunity for Mr. Bogalski, who is in the meeting, to share. And I'll just talk for a moment. Tomorrow we'll be getting kind of on the communication outreach piece. So every Friday I am publishing, trying to keep it to about a page or so update, sending it to staff and the community, our parents out on Facebook as well. So we have, last week that featured links to a number of publications that are out there. Tomorrow's will actually be a little bit shorter, which people will probably welcome. And it'll touch on some of the things we talked about tonight, as well as clarifying things that came out of the governor's announcement today regarding facial coverings. But tomorrow we will be emailing to all parents, putting it on our district website and putting it on Facebook as survey. It's just about 6 questions go out to parents, asking for some of their opinions right now regarding the reopening, basically getting their preferences for a full physical reopening, hybrid approach, distance learning. It's going to help us in coming back to you and sharing some direction that we have from the parent community right now. So that will go out with full blast tomorrow. We'll leave it open for a week and a half. When we come back into our meeting on July 2nd, we'll have data there to share with you and with the public regarding where parents' thinking is right now. Again, I think things continue to change. I saw a headline earlier that cases are now increasing in 23 states. I think it was 10 or 13 yesterday or the day before. So it's this situation continues to shift for sure. So I've said it a couple of times now. At this point in time, I would be asking the board to provide direction or make a decision regarding our reopening plans on July 16th is that target date. If circumstances require us to go a little bit later than that, which I hope they won't, I really believe we need that 3 to 4 week period prior to school opening to know exactly what we're doing for parents and staff both. So the July 2nd meeting, board meeting, will have a lot of importance in terms of direction for us to prepare for that July 16th meeting. So any questions on that before I shift into what's up on the screen now?
Board questions? I have one, Brian. So with
Sure.
respect to the survey that's going to go out, is it going to ask not only what are your feelings about the different possibilities, but if you have kids, how many and which would you choose for them? So we can get an idea on numbers.
Yeah, we do have some breakdown of numbers without making the survey too complicated. We do ask if you have a child in TK through 2nd, 3rd through 5th, 6th through 8th, 9-12 Dixon High or 9-12 Alt Ed. And we didn't ask for the numbers of children, but we will get a sense of numbers just from those questions. We had a lot of conversation about how we wanted to keep the survey as simple as we could, but still get some valuable information out of it. We think this approach, we'll be able to do that. So,
yeah, I think it's going to be important to have an idea if we're looking at a hybrid model, what we'll need for distance learning versus in person.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you know, as is almost always the case, you know, the comments that people add into the mix are going to be really important. You know, there are the choose the choice, make the choice from 3 options or those types of things, but there will be an opportunity for written comments and questions as well. We really hope people will take advantage of that. So we'll go out tomorrow. Anything else on that? Nope. Okay, so there's a great deal of interest. You know, one of the things that was most disappointing to people at the high school level because of the closure was the ending of sports. We were in the middle of spring competition happening, and typically summer times are filled with summer league basketball and 7-on-7 football, passing leagues, a lot of conditioning for all the sports, some volleyball work, gosh, even cheerleading attends camps and does an extensive amount of work. And all of that obviously came to a screeching halt when closure happened. And there is now guidance that has been provided in compliance with all of the recommendations from the public health agencies about being able to resume some athletic activities here at the high school level. And I got Bob Bogowski and Brett Peterson. Bob is the assistant principal at Dixon High School, Brett the athletic director. They are in the meeting to share with us an outline of a way to resume some athletic activity. And you will see in this that it is very, very narrowly defined in what is allowable. It amounts to conditioning, very, very distinctly separated and organized conditioning activities. So, Bob, if you don't mind taking it away, please. And board, you know, I don't view this as something that requires formal action from you at the end. We do put this this agenda item up every week as information, discussion, action. It can be direction for us to proceed if you'd like to take action. That is certainly feasible, but we are looking for some guidance from you tonight about initiating the conditioning program. So on that note, Mr. Bogowski.
Thank you, Mr. Zolan, and school board. I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you about this. I think to piggyback on what Brian was just talking about, and given our exit from athletics and from school in March, I might refer to what we're talking about is a reconditioning, which is before preconditioning, which is before conditioning, and getting our student athletes and our students out and moving in an effective way. I think it's important to recognize, Dixon Unified School District recognize that student participation in extracurricular and co-curricular activities is an essential part of their education. Currently, there's a high level of interest in seeing our athletics teams beginning practices in order to promote the child's physical and mental well-being. And I think that that's an essential component here. The kids getting out and moving is just it has become a very important component and a serious point of discussion. I also want to highlight, before I talk about anything, that Dixon Unified School District and Dixon High School will prioritize the safety of both student athletes and coaches. We have based what I will talk about here based on the Solano County Public Health California Interscholastic Federation, and the National Federation of State High School Associations. I also, as Brian also hinted earlier, the governor this morning released the public mask mandate. The C is constantly changing on this under protocols. CIF San Joaquin Association that we are under control of has made clear in recent meetings with Commissioner Athletic Directors. First is there's an emphasis upon local control. There is an adherence. There's a CIF calendar, and there's CIF guidelines that were released 1 week ago. They have announced they will proceed very slowly, and the goal is to make sure that CIF believes, or one of their focuses is that there will be a season of sport for fall, winter, and spring sports next year. Additionally, face coverings are recommended according to the CIF document last night, and according to news today, I would say that facial coverings are mandatory for coaches during workouts. Phase 1 is currently where we are. All student athletes and coaches should remain in shelter in place. Gyms, fields, common areas remain closed. Virtual meetings are encouraged, and our coaches have been maintaining contact with their student athletes through virtual meetings. There's no competition. There's no travel to competition. What is allowed is individual training at home, virtual coaching workouts, and virtual coaching film scouting sessions. Moving into phase 2, which is the direction I'd like to see us going, under general guidelines. There's no gathering of more than what is allowed by the local guidelines. Workouts should be conducted in pods of between 5 and 10 students working out together weekly with a group for an entire week. Smaller pods can be used for different activities. Again, the maximum size of the pod is 10 people. Before the workout commences, all student athletes are in a pre-screening is performed, where there's a questionnaire asking about their health, whether or not they've had any symptoms, as well as their temperature being taken. There's broad strokes of what the pre-screening is. In addition, every athlete and person must maintain social distancing of 6 feet. And local county guidelines with regards to that will be followed as those parts change. In essence, I think it's easier to break down kind of what is allowed and what is not allowed. Vulnerable athletes should continue to shelter in space. Social distancing must continue. Students must wear their personal clothing to practice, and groupings of under 10 people, that includes the coach. The maximum allowed is 9 athletes and 1 coach. The common areas are closed, so there's not a congregation. Virtual meetings should continue. All the practices will be outdoor with no locker room use. And we will continue infection prevention with sanitizing, hand washing, temperature checks, and pre-participation screening. Again, that pre-participation screening, there's a process involved in that. What is not allowed in phase 2? There is no physical contact between players. There's no tackling, there's no tagging, there's no screening. There's no audience, there's no parents. There's no use of indoor locker rooms or indoor facilities such as gyms or weight rooms. There's no direct contact between athletes. There's no sharing of equipment, of balls, pads, helmets, bats, etc. And there's no high fives, there's no chest bumps, and there's no handshaking. All right, so I think the easiest way is a student athlete is going to have their lane. They need to stay in their lane. Examples of activities: basketball players can shoot and dribble at their own basket with their own basketball. There's no sharing of balls. Football players can participate in individual drills. Volleyball players can work on footwork. Baseball and softball can hit out of the cage, and balls are picked up using disposable rubber gloves. Wrestlers may condition and run outside. Tennis players can do individual drills, wall volleys, serves. And runners, long distance runners, need to maintain social distancing while running. At this point, are there any questions from the board? We would like, well, Brian, I'll toss it back to you, I think. We would like to work on putting the structures in place to be able to allow our student athletes to work out in these small pods, as they are called.
Board questions?
Do we have a questionnaire, like a COVID questionnaire, I have a kiddo who's on a private team, and every week we have to fill out a COVID questionnaire, and they also have to have their temperature taken before every practice by the coach.
Yes, that is part of the pre-screening process. There is a series of questions they are asked every day coming in. There is also a weekly questionnaire, yes, and temperatures taken, as well as hand washing stations to use upon entry into the facility. I also want to talk entry and exit will be two different locations. So student athletes entering versus entering for a workout, and those exiting won't be crossing.
I don't have a question. I just want to comment that in the beginning you talked about this being also part of sort of mental health and physical health as well as physical health. And I just want to really emphasize that. I know that, some gyms have opened recently for people in, this community and others. And I just really think that it's important for us to get our kids. I know we have a large number of kids. I can't remember what the number is. You've said it before when you've come before the board, but we have a really large number of kids who do this. And for them, that's part of their regular activities and how they live their life. And I think it's important that if we can get kids back for their sort of normalcy back into this, that would be good, and we can do it safely. That's the way to do it. So I really appreciate you putting this together and trying to do something safely for them.
And I just want to piggyback on that real quick. There is a phase 3. We can come back and present to that. Again, there's significant countywide and statewide, there's significant levels that as far as phases that have to be achieved for us to move there. But just very quickly, phase 3 would not be playing. Phase 3 would be the throwing of balls that are cleaned between every touch. There's some significant restrictions that are put in there as well. I can talk at length about that, but it's a long night for you guys already, and I think that I can't wait to get to that place with regards to COVID-19 and be able to have that next level discussion with you.
Yeah, Bob. So I just wanted to make sure I understood one thing. This says outside, no weight room. Earlier there was a reference to weightlifting, so I assume that would be like dumbbells outside with small groups if they did weightlifting, social distancing or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, my struggle was there's CIF guidelines when it comes to weightlifting. It's not allowed. Right now, there's no equipment that can be used because it's shared. And the guidelines, when combining the guidelines from the different groups, there's a little bit of cross-referencing that has to be done. Right now, all the workouts will be what we would refer to as body weight workouts and running outside. There would be no equipment used, no sharing of towels. There's no sharing of water bottles. There's no water horses. It is, like I said, I think the best way to describe it is exercising kind of in your lane.
I didn't see any reference to swimmers or water polo people. Yep. So
good question.
Pardon me?
If the city pool opens, and right now we are not able to use the city pool, as I'm aware, unless that shifted recently. But there would be one student athlete allowed per lane, with one coach on the deck wearing a mask, and those student athletes would have to depart the deck before the next student athletes would come in using a separate exit than they are using for entrance. The same protocol, pre-screening protocol, would be used on the way into the swimming pool. Water polo would pretty much follow a swimming workout, being in their lanes. There's some modifications coaches can make to water polo workouts. But again, I go back to the description of in your lane. I had, and observing, anyway, that answers your question.
Yeah, thank you.
Yep.
Other board questions? So Bob, I guess my one comment, I like this idea as long as we make clear to all the athletes that this is serious. This is a team effort to make these workouts happen. And if people don't take the rules seriously, then it's going to become a problem and things might not get to keep happening.
I absolutely can't agree with you more. In fact, I would go as far as to say that the importance of social distancing, if a student athlete comes down, I mean, it's going to go down for everybody. I think it mandates it mandates the social distancing, not just what during workouts, but it mandates the social distancing during the rest of the time as well, to assure that people stay healthy and everyone can participate this, and taking into consideration and going back to the team concept that's so valuable, but taking care of your teammates, and taking care of your teammates is not just during practice, but taking care of your teammates is how you act outside of practice as well.
Yeah, and I may not be there anymore, but I remember those days when I thought I was invulnerable. You know, that's, you feel that way when you're young and you're strong and you're fit. And we did see early on with that example of the choir that met in the big chamber and they social distance, and they ended up with like 80-something% of the choir getting COVID. Yep. Because there they are singing loud, expelling lots of air, you know, doing what choir is. And so, you know, to the extent possible, if these students are going to work out, I would say 6 feet, do more, you know, because they're going to be running, they're going to be breathing hard. The point of working out is to press your body to strain it. So yeah, you know,
and we are extremely fortunate in the fields outside of the high school that we can spread out a lot more than 6 feet with the fields and utilize all the different grass fields that are out there for our workouts. You are absolutely correct. And that would be our next for Mr. Peterson and myself to go out and really sketch out exactly where places are and stretch that distancing out as much as possible.
Okay. Any other board questions or comments? Okay, any public questions or comments from Mr. Bogalski?
I have board member Masita with her hand up. Is that?
No, my question got answered.
Oh.
Sorry. Thank you.
Okay, any other public questions or comments?
I'm seeing none at this time.
Okay, so Brian, do we need to just give direction, or we're not going to take
direction is fine. You know, this is not it doesn't require action by any means. We're following all of the guidelines that exist. So I just wanted to say I appreciate the board's openness to this. This will be a good thing for our high school age students. And I appreciate the work that Bob and Brett have put into organizing this and making it so clear. I cannot overstate the importance of students and coaches doing this properly. I've shared with Bob and Brett my expectation. If an individual student can't do what she or he is supposed to do, they're done. If a group of students, a whole team or program can't do what the expectations are, that team or activity gets shut down. If coaches are not following the guidelines and ensuring they're doing everything they can for the student athletes to adhere to the guidelines, they're done. In my mind, this would be a grounds for release, which is very easy to do for coaching positions. I will have zero tolerance for coaches who do not make every effort to follow this program as it is being designed. You know, Bob and Brett and Mark and I had lots of conversation last week about the safety procedures. I'm very confident that they will provide protection for our kids if they are adhered to. So that drum will get banged over and over and over again. And should there be issues, we will have no choice but to shut things down. So,
Bob, is the thought process that the coaches and athletes that participate in this actually have something in writing showing them all this and they sign off on it before they start, that they understand these rules?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So we have a letter to parents, and then we also have a, Melissa referred to a pre-workout form that's required as well. Absolutely.
Okay. Any other board questions or comments?
I just applaud you for this careful and thoughtful outline of what's available, what's allowed and what isn't. And that's very reassuring.
Thank you.
It sounds like we have their direction to go ahead and proceed. Is there anyone on the board that wants to comment against that? Okay, seeing none, I think you have your direction.
Thank you. Thanks, Bob and Brett, for all your work on this. And Mark will be helping with the safety elements of this. And as we divided things up in our subcommittees and such, I will ultimately be responsible for overseeing the high school athletic activities, including if we get to resume competitive sports come the school year. So thank you again, Bob and Brett and board, for that direction. Now,
Board, thanks very much.
Thank
I'll
you.
invite Mr. Giramonte to talk to us on some of the issues around teaching and learning.
Good evening, everyone. I have a couple of items tonight to update you on. First is I just want to give an update on where we are with regard to planning for the different scenarios, the potential reopening scenarios, and what those pieces might look like. And more than anything, I'm not going to share tonight any of the draft schedules or anything like that. They're just not in a place where I feel comfortable sharing them publicly without raising a whole bunch of questions for folks. But I do think it's absolutely necessary for us just to minimally share kind of our key considerations as we proceed through planning the various scenarios. Those various scenarios, just as a reminder, scenario one would be that we continue in distance learning 2.0. The second scenario is that we're able to come back in some sort of a hybrid model. Third scenario is that we're able to come back fully, or some version of fully. And then, you know, our first consideration obviously is health and safety. So whatever, we'll be taking our primary marching orders from county and state health and all the relevant folks there. And Mark is working with us hand in hand on that as we move through this. The other piece is we realize that with all those scenarios, the likelihood that we're going to have to move between them at various points of the year is a real likelihood. So we want to create scenarios and structures where if we have to, as an example, close schools again and go to distance learning, that transition is as seamless as possible for our students and for our staffs. You know, March 13th this year hit us pretty quickly. You know, I don't, like all districts in California, I don't think any of us were as prepared as we wanted to be. And next time we need to be more prepared. So as we're creating those plans, just making those things really seamless, you know, especially from, I mean, obviously the academic learning is important, but I think the social emotional well-being of our students and staff is really important to address, and that will be a big part of that. The other piece that we really are considering as we're creating plans are if kids are not able to come back to campus full time, that we need to be able to create structures that work for families. And the primary way of doing that is, you know, if kids are coming back, say 2 days a week as an example, and a family has a kid at Dixon High School, a kid at C.A. Jacobs, and a kid at Anderson, we need to, as much as possible, ensure that those kids are going to school on those 2 days at the same time, so that families can arrange work, rides, etc., in ways that make sense. So we're looking to, this will be, if we're not back at school full time, again, if we're not back at school full time, we know that will be disruptive for families. I speak very personally on that. So we need to figure out all the ways that we can to mitigate that. The other piece, obviously, that we need to be thinking about is our contractual arrangements and agreements with our labor groups. We can't do anything that falls outside of contract. And the final thing that's really key for us is creating schedules that allow us to meet our mission to graduate students college and career ready. Kids need to learn next year, period. And they need to learn at high levels. We need to provide that rigor regardless of whatever we're in. And that's obviously the easiest way to do that is if we have all the kids in front of us every day. That's how we've done schools for a long time in this country. But just if we're not able to do that, we still have to do what we need to do to make sure that they do. So, you know, we're working through all of those considerations right now. Again, as we move closer to that July 16th date that Brian mentioned earlier, as far as a final decision date, we will be ready with instructional schedules that make sense with those parameters in mind. I can stop there. It's kind of a natural stopping place before I give one other update on the work that our team is doing.
Does anyone have any questions on that aspect of the discussion? I don't know, Nick, how much depth, like you said, this could probably be a topic that could go all night by itself. And I don't know if we've really talked about, but are you guys going to be prepared to make some recommendations for discussion to the board before asking us to make a decision? I mean, I know the subcommittee is addressing it, but you know, this is such an in-depth topic that the board members may disagree on this. And I hate to think that we get to July 16th and we don't have consensus. And Brian, if you want to step in here.
I will, yeah. So I think it's really imperative that when we meet again on July 2nd, we outline a couple of 2 or 3 options for you.
Okay.
And really dissect those, you know, very, very thoroughly. And if you need, you know, we'll take every question. It may be that you tell us, go away before the 16th and we want to know this, or plan some additional on that, or those types of things. But no, we will not walk in cold on the 16th and say, hey guys, vote on this. That would be very unfair to you folks. And, you know, we're trying to, you know, Nick had a meeting with a number of teachers involved in it this week, with principals, talking about instructional elements. That was, I think, a good start in that. We have a lot of work to do, but we have to continue working with the board members here and make this reasonable in terms of choices. And yes, the board may end up in 5 different places when we're done this. And you know, I think that the more information you have, the sooner, you know, the easier it will be to come to some consensus. But July 2nd, you'll get some more concrete stuff.
And Luke, just to respond this way, you know, knowing that you are 5 independent and diverse thinkers, and also that this virus is, who knows what it will look like on July 16th. We're planning all of these as if that's going to be the direction that we receive, if that makes sense. So, you know, do I have preferences as an individual and a parent? I certainly do, but I don't get to make that decision for you all. So we're moving forward like they could all happen. We have to.
Yeah, and like we've said many times, like you just said, we could even make a decision and then life changes it on us. So anyway.
Yeah,
okay,
the virus can change everything.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, any other board questions or comments on this issue? Any public questions or comments on what Mr. Giramonte has covered?
I have Ryan up.
Hi there.
Hi, go ahead, Ryan.
I appreciate, I mean, you guys have done a lot of work, and I can't even imagine trying to make these kinds of decisions. But July 16th is like 3 weeks before school starts. And I guess the concern comes in if we decide to go with like home learning, you know, 2.0, as Nick said, what kind of training can we get in those 3 weeks for the teachers to get them up to speed so that they are getting the rigor, they are getting the program that we need them to have?
Good question. Thank you. Nick, you want to address that?
Yeah, so we don't get to not plan for distance learning, Ryan, for
Okay.
2 reasons. One, we anticipate that we're going to have some families who want to continue to engage in that model. And we would like to be able to provide that opportunity should it be something that we feel like we can do and that we're given license to do by the state. And also, even if we come back full time, we don't know if on November 12th, state shuts us down again because the virus has reared its head. So we have to be ready. To what extent we're able to provide professional development for folks will really depend somewhat on where we feel this train going prior to even that July 16th date. You know, do we need to train all of our staff really in depth on this, or just staff that will be engaging in that, and we can hold off on some of that training later on. All those pieces are there. I can tell you our team right now is doing a lot of research and consideration of different platforms that are out there. We were fairly loose with staff at the first time with distance learning, and there was part of that was by design. We wanted to see what folks could come up with on their own and learn, and people did a fantastic job. But I think one thing that both staff and parents have expressed is they'd like some more consistency with regard to how we're using online platforms. So we're researching those. As an example, we're actually, we've got a new one that we're trying out at summer school this year to see if that's something that we could use in our K-8 program. And then whatever we choose, however that goes, yeah, we gotta train people. And to be completely honest, ease of use for staff and families will be a big consideration for whatever we choose. You know, it has to be.
Okay, on the same note, if let's say on the 16th, like you said, we have to do the distance learning no matter what, but we're cutting it so close. What kind of advance notice do teachers have to schedule the training, to, you know, that sort of thing? Because I mean, we're just, we have other things going on, obviously, over the summer, and I'm not talking vacations and things, but, you know, just other things to leave the time open. I mean, I am concerned that I don't want to miss some training, or other people miss training because of those things. So it just seems like we're running out of time.
Trust me, I feel that. not to be funny. I mean, yeah, I was working on our calendar today, and I think part of what I'm going to say next may also lead into some of those pieces. You know, and part of the thing with summer work is, as you know, prior to, I think was August 6th, is that Thursday? I can't make anybody be there.
Right.
You know, and while I think a lot of people would be there, and Ryan, you're absolutely one of them, you know, trying to find ways to make sure that we've got the right people in the room who need that information quickly is always a challenge. And there are things that we can do to incentivize folks to be there. And that'll, obviously those conversations are ongoing with our bargaining unit leadership. We haven't talked too much about that yet, but that'll be something that as we get closer, we'll have to, or as we continue, not even closer, we're there, work with them on.
And while summer training would be ideal, I assume that one, COVID creates some difficulties in in-person trainings as well. But then also, if we try to make this decision earlier, we don't know how the virus infection rate and everything's going to change to make that more difficult. So, but those are very good questions. Thank you.
Thank you for your answers.
Yeah.
No, and Ryan, I'm going to thank you for your questions too. And I was going to add in what Nick mentioned about mandatory trainings during summertime, or ensuring enough people in there to be effective is one of the challenges. And obviously we need to compensate people for that kind of time. Also want to be mindful of honoring people's opportunity to kind of regroup and reset after these these weeks of all this turmoil and upset. But I also want to make an acknowledgement of we announced the afternoon of March 13th that we were closing, and it took a little while for us to get our legs underneath us, but the growth that teaching staff showed in supporting students and providing activities to them through the weeks of distance learning, I think give us a foundation to move forward with. Talk about a new game that we had to start, but I think a lot of lessons learned that will help along with the training. Not to diminish the training, but just wanted to acknowledge a lot of people learned a lot of things and did things they never thought they would be able to do, and we'll be able to build on that.
Okay, thank you. Any other public questions on what Nick's covered?
Not at this time.
Okay, Nick, please proceed.
Yeah, and so this is really kind of in line with what Ryan was talking about. So our focus now from an instructional standpoint has really shifted to the big question, regardless of how we open, which is what do we do to address what is being referred to in educational circles as the COVID slide? So those of us who do this work know about what's called the summer slide, you know, the natural academic loss that kids experience over the summer. That the summer slide traditionally is more severe for students who come from groups that are at risk, our low-income students, our English learners, our special education students. They decline more in the summer than do some of their counterparts traditionally. So the COVID slide, now we're talking about students not being in school from March until August. People are anticipating even bigger gaps. And likewise, kids who traditionally in the summer slide don't show much of a slide will probably show some as well. So we need to be as ready as possible to address those, again, regardless of whatever model we're in. And so we met this week with our elementary leadership groups. So that was all of our grade level leads, our RTI leads, our special education teachers, EL teachers, et cetera, to begin this conversation and sort of lay the groundwork for it. I think some of them were a little frustrated by the meeting because they were ready to get chomping at the bit. And for me, it was really kind of setting the table for the work that they're going to engage in. So the real first step is identifying how we're going to assess kids. You know, there are some, you know, fairly simple ways to do that. But we also need to really clearly identify what are the gaps and how do we address them, because it will not be as simple as simply trying to cram in the last 3 months of school into the first month of next year, and then we can move on like everything's hunky-dory. This will be a year, if not years-long process to go about the business of recuperating this. People talk about the economy taking 2 or 3 years to recover from this. For some of our kids learning, it'll be the same thing. So we've got to be very strategic about how we are reteaching those standards, and it starts with figuring out what the heck those things are through some valid assessment. Subsequent to that, we'll pull everybody together, and this is a later July conversation, because at that point we'll know how we're coming back, and then figure out, okay, what are we going to do from an instructional standpoint? What we have committed to as a team is to be very flexible in areas where we've been more rigid in the past. So things like instructional schedules. You know, if you're an elementary kid, you know, you do math this hour, you're doing ELA this hour. But we need to be able to perhaps think about things a little bit differently if we're going to be really responsive to kids' needs, really on an individual basis. So lots more to come on that. That work is harder at elementary. We'll do that work at secondary as well, but in a departmentalized setting, it's a little bit easier to address. Won't be any easier for teachers once they get back, but as far as the planning goes, that should be a little more approachable and not quite as still a challenge.
Okay, any board questions? Seeing none, any public questions on that?
Seeing none at this time.
Okay, thank you, Nick.
Thank you.
Okay, Brian.
Yeah, Kim, do you want to address some of the elements related to students with disabilities and special education program?
Sure. I am happy to report that our extended school year program did get up and running, not this past Monday, but the Monday before, and it is distance learning format. As far as looking at the different models that we could start instruction next year, I'm on the committee with Nick because it will affect maybe how we divide out the students that are in resource, so that if we end up doing some type of a hybrid format, not all the resource kids are on the same group, that they're divided up. We also have to think about the assessments. We are obviously really behind on assessments because when we went out, assessments stopped. We have triennials that have to be done, as well as any initials that were pending at that time. I'm already working with the speech and language pathologist and the psychs before we closed, as far as pulling some lists together. The psychs definitely are already getting a schedule together to start doing some type of assessment by appointment using protective wear if we have to go down that route in August. So we're looking in the assessment arena at all the different ways that we may have to approach getting assessments done, just as we're looking at all the different ways that we may have to be going about delivering instruction to our students. We also took the time in the spring. There were a lot of different platforms that are remedial in nature, specifically for students with learning disabilities. that offered free trials. And we took advantage of those, and I've been gathering feedback from the case managers on how they worked at the different grade levels, what they liked, what they didn't like, ease of use. Of course, that's all going to be information that will be shared as we start looking at the various learning platforms, because many of them not only address deficits for students, but they're for all students. It's just some of them have a more remedial aspect to them that helps students with special needs. I'm also looking at what our class list look like as far as what we call our intensive learning center or our special day classes. Those class sizes are small by nature, but again, looking at having to maintain that distance, and we would be splitting those classes in half, talking about the best way to provide services, the fact that if we were doing assessment or speech was working with students, that we'd need, I'm talking with Mark's on the, or Mark on this, the shields in front of the face rather than a mask, because the students need to see the mouth. So just as we're looking at all the different ways that we might be delivering instructions in my area of the world, we are looking at all the different factors that we're going to need to consider as far as educating and assessing our special needs students. We also have the factor that some of our students with sensory issues, it could be a problem keeping the mask on them. So we're trying to think of some creative ways to encourage that. And, or what would that look like if we did have students that were having that difficulty, how we would handle that within the classroom space and still manage to keep everybody safe. So we are looking at all aspects and all contingency plans around the safety as well as the delivery of the support instruction.
Thank you, Kim. Any board questions? So Kim, is every special ed student in the district having to be reassessed and specifically also looked at? Can they do distance learning? Can't they? What needs does each child have depending on what happens in the future?
Okay, the assessment that I'm talking about is the formal assessment that happens every 3 years. Those are the assessments that need to be done. And then of course, initial assessments are when students are referred to us. However, once we do start working with our students, regardless of the format, it is not unusual, especially for our students who may be starting with a new case manager or who may be changing school, going from 5th to 6th or from 8th to 9th, for us to do what we call informal assessments in order to determine where their gaps are. Part of the discussion has been around that we are probably going to have to do informal assessments at all the grade levels with our resource specialists so that we can determine any losses the kids may have had or pick up on any gaps that maybe have not been detected beforehand. The nice thing about, and I wish we had more kids that were availing themselves of distance learning, but I'm hoping that those that we are providing the instruction on distance learning, that it will help with some the remediation that those students will need. Not all students are eligible for extended school year, but for those that are, it's definitely going to be a help with this long time between when they were here physically in March as to when we come back. But yes, we have discussed that we're going to have to do a lot more informal assessment to determine where these children are when we pick up the mantle of the teaching in the fall, regardless of the format. And many of the platforms that we are looking at also have assessment pieces tied into them to where they can assess and quickly tell us where gaps are.
Great, thank you. Any other board questions? Any public questions or comments?
None at this time.
Okay, thank you, Kim.
Right, keep your microphone on there, Mr. Monticello. It's your turn. Talk some of the safety elements.
Good evening, board members, Superintendent Dolan. To give you an update on safety measures, either tomorrow or Monday, I'll be heading over to the County Office of Education to pick up our portion of what the state is sending to each district. Real quickly, that will include N95 masks for nurses. That will include 2 cloth masks for every student in grades 2 through 12, 2 cloth masks for every student in K through 6, 2 disposable masks for all of our students and adults, face shields for every teacher, 84 gallons of hand sanitizer, which works out to about 12 per school, and thermometers. So that's coming in from the state. At the same time, we've already started talking to different vendors about procurement of equipment that will allow us to disinfect rooms without having to wipe each and every surface. So that includes in-class foggers, handheld or backpack misters that we can use, disinfectant. Also reached out to companies that will work with us on adding UV lights to our HVAC systems, so the air is cleaner when it's coming in from the HVAC systems. We're also looking at renting hand washing stations, because to wash your hands walking on campus for 20 seconds will require more than what we can have in our bathrooms. We're negotiating as to whether we'll purchase disposable masks for students and or cloth masks. And there are companies out there that do rentals of masks where they will drop off and pick up and clean and return in a sanitized area. I will tell you that what we are looking at is the health safety of our staff and students in opening schools, including all the PPE equipment that our teachers and students will need, and any kind of either social distancing or barriers that allow us to make sure students are not too close to each other. As I've told the rest of the group, including the subcommittee, I am moving forward with a full opening. It's much easier for me to cut back if we decide to do something other than full. So I am planning to have a full opening right now as of August 10th for our students and staff. We are constantly reviewing and keeping up with World Health Organization, Center for Disease Control, State of California, CDE, and Solano County as to what needs to be done to meet whatever the current needs are, along with OSHA and Cal OSHA. So that is where we're at. It is my expectation that we will have the equipment that we need to open schools fully when we start here in just a few days. I would like everybody to know that we are trying to balance the health safety concerns of our staff and students with the educational and social, emotional, and mental aspects of all of our students. Just as we heard tonight, it is wonderful that we're moving forward slowly with high school athletics, and I certainly don't want to say that this would allow us to ignore any other club on a campus that some of our students find meets their needs to make them a more well-rounded person. But I will tell you that I can hardly wait to get the surveys out so we can get some feedback from our parents as to what their expectations are. I will again reiterate that the economy doesn't get going until schools open. And that is where we are heading down the road. So I will take any questions that anybody have right now.
Thank you, Mark. Any board questions?
Well, I have a comment because I'm on the committee, and the we disturbs me because I don't think I'm part of the we. And I just want to say that there are other, it's one thing to plan for full opening, but I think we also have to look at all of our options that may result from full opening.
Okay, any other board questions or comments? Mark, I guess my question is with respect to the different equipment, hand sanitizer, all those sorts of things that we would need if we reopen. Are you getting a sense yet whether it's going to be available in adequate supply? I mean, there are going to be a lot of school districts and businesses and everyone else jockeying to try to get alcohol-based hand sanitizer and masks and everything else. And, you know, not to mention the misters and the UV lights and what, have you got any sense on any of that yet?
So what I'm seeing out there is that hand sanitizer, wipes, mask, gloves seem to be in ample supply right now, and orders are fulfilled. The foggers and the misters are harder to track down as people are building inventories to send those out. But I am hoping to know more in the middle of July as the status of those, and some of them could even be here by then.
And so just to be clear, I think you mentioned it, but could you tell us in terms of the PPE that the state's supplying, how long would that last into the school year if we were just going with the state supplies?
They are thinking that they're giving us enough for 60 days.
Okay. Now, I don't know if this is, I mean, I guess it goes under safety as much as anything else. Has there been any conversation yet with the city, since we have a lot of kids that come to school on the Ready Ride? I saw a lot of the stuff that is being put out with school recommendations is talking about how to handle social distancing on buses and stuff, which obviously we don't run the buses. So we're going to have some kind of conversation with the city on what they can do and what's needed and all that. Has there been any kind of contact yet on any of those issues?
I have not reached out to either Ready Ride or Michael's yet.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, of course, we have the Michaels for some of the other transportation, and hopefully, hopefully that would be easier since there are probably not as many students in those buses. But okay, any other board questions or comments? Brian, anything you'd like to add on that?
No, I'll be quiet on this one.
Okay.
Well, actually, here's the one thing I will say. You know, Mark has taken to saying, and obviously there's all the layers of this safety work, that what we will be doing is ensuring that we are adhering at a minimum. So where we can exceed, we will, but we are adhering to all guidance issued by federal, state, and local health agencies, right? So I think one of the things that'll happen is there will be questions about why this or why that or why not that or why not this. And our answer in many cases, I think, is going to be because the guidance says X, Y, or Z, right? And we could end up debating 10,000 different little questions or issues or items. And we'd spend a ridiculous amount of time doing that. And so I think us working from the guidance, us being able to refer people to the guidance is going to be really important as we go through this. Otherwise, Mark will die the death of 1,000 paper cuts, I think, you know.
So your speaking now reminded me of something, Brian. So now I'm going to flap my gums a little more. So Mark, you mentioned the renting or buying of hand wash stations. And I'm wondering the availability of those. And my particular thought process is I think it's going to be important to have those, not only to have them around the school so they can easily be accessed and used frequently, but I've been kind of surprised. One of the areas I've not really seen much conversation about in the different guidance pamphlets and booklets is bathrooms. And that's just shocking to me, that our experts are not addressing bathrooms because, and I know I mentioned it before, I mean, there's recent studies that say, you know, they know toilets send plumes of stuff into the air. They don't know if coronavirus could be in that, but it makes sense that it could be. But at a more basic level, it's an area of the school where you have students going into from multiple classrooms. So you can't keep kids segregated as well. They're going in, there are surfaces that can be potentially dirty that, you know, we've got to find ways to sterilize throughout the day a lot. And yet I'm not seeing this really addressed. So I think hand wash stations would go a long way towards allowing kids to only have to go in the bathroom if they need to actually use the restroom, which might help some. And then we would certainly have to look at protocols for additional cleaning in bathrooms, and how we best minimize any risks there. So.
Yes, and I think to answer the question, are hand wash stations readily available? The answer is yes.
Okay, great. That was a very long question, so thank you for remembering it. Okay, let's go to public questions and comments. Any public questions or comments for Mark?
I'm seeing none at this time.
Okay. Okay, is that all you got for us then?
Let me just ask Cindy to just real briefly touch on some of the HR related components of this. You know, she doesn't have a separate committee, but she sits in various ones at times. And, you know, the issue around working conditions for our employees is a significant one. So Cindy, if you don't mind jumping in and just talking a little bit about the nature of your work here in this whole process.
Yes, sure. So we have our regular standing meetings with our labor partners, and I think that's a very important topic, and it's primarily the majority of the topics as we talk about not just reopening schools, but having employees return back to work. You know, at the same time, we need to understand and know all of the parameters in which Mark is working on, but the parameters and the guidelines and the protocols for our employees as well to ensure their health and safety when they do return back to work. And so those conversations are ongoing, obviously, and will continue to be ongoing as we understand more of how schools will reopen. There might be some different aspects. We might need to look at things a little bit differently, especially if employees are not working at the school sites. So there's conversations around that as well. For purposes of planning in regards to staffing, we're going to need to start having a deeper conversation around that as well to be prepared and ready, depending on how we open schools or regardless of how we open schools. And so just wanted to let everyone know that, you know, that topic is a very, very sensitive, but at the same time, very important topic that has been ongoing on a weekly basis as well.
Thank you, Cindy. Any board questions or comments for Cindy? Seeing none. Any public questions or comments for Cindy?
Not at this time.
Okay, thank you, Cindy. Okay, Brian.
All right. Yeah. So I told you Monique was getting a pass on this one. Obviously, there's a whole bunch of funding issues, expenditure issues related to this. You know, we still expect that 715,000 give or take with CARES funding, which will address some of this, but certainly how we reopen, what the structure is, will impact you know, supplies, products, staffing levels, as Cindy just mentioned as well. So that'll be something that we keep a close eye on here as we work through these. I think it's 36 working days until school starts. Doesn't sound like very much, does it? And with my team, you can actually make those 7-day weeks instead of 5-day weeks. But we do have a lot to still work towards before August 10th, and we're doing it. And we will be back on July 2nd with the start of some proposals for you.
Okay.
Mhm.
Okay, so is that it for 11C?
It is.
We have, and this is listed as an action item. Do we have any action for this?
No, that was just information, discussion, action.
Okay.
Yeah. We move on to Mr. Giramonte.
Okay. Item 11D, adoption of Dixon Unified's COVID-19 operations report.
Yeah, so those of you who've been around for a while know that at this meeting, typically when we approve the budget, we also are asking you to consider the approval of our local control accountability plan, or LCAP. Earlier in the spring, Governor Newsom signed an executive order that pushed the LCAP back to December 15th. In lieu of an LCAP, LEAs are required to complete a COVID-19 operations report. And really that report is a description for the community and for the board to memorialize the work that we did during the COVID-19 closure. Specifically, the areas that need to be addressed are an overview explaining the changes to the program, a description as to how we met the needs of English learners, foster youth, and low-income students in our district, or sometimes we refer to those students as students that are targeted for their supplemental concentration grant dollars. A description of how, what we did to deliver high quality distance learning, a description of how we fed kids through a school lunch program or a food program. And then finally, if a district did this, description of how they provided supervision to students during ordinary school hours. So the report addresses all of those save for the final one. We did not provide any supervision of students during school hours. We did not have any community outreach for that, either mainly from groups that would ask for that. Just as a point of reference, only one of the 6 districts in Solano County did do that. That was Vallejo, who already had a pretty robust program along those lines that they simply expanded during the time of the closure. So those of you used to the LCAP, you know that's a 250-page document, and this one is, significantly shorter. That is by design. The state asked us to keep our answers to 300 words. I did not. But I got pretty close in most cases. So tonight, as I mentioned earlier, this is to be approved concurrently with the budget that you approved earlier. It will go to the county, not for approval, but for their knowledge. You post it on their website and in addition to our website.
Okay, thank you. Any board questions or comments for Nick on this report? Seeing none. Any public questions or comments for Nick?
Seeing none.
Okay, this is, do we have a motion to approve the district's COVID-19 operations report?
So moved.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Roll call vote. Lloyd?
Aye.
Jewel?
Aye.
Melissa?
Aye.
Catlin?
Aye.
Aye as well from me. Okay. Motion passes. Avid district update.
Yes, so in a world of everything is new, Avid sort of feels like a foundational touchstone for us, which is really nice to be able to sort of have a little bit of normalcy in this very strange June, as it were. So I want to welcome Maria Lukien, our Supplemental Concentration Grant Coordinator, who, among other things, oversees our Avid program as our Avid District Coordinator. So take it away, Maria.
Thank you, Mr. Giramonte. Good evening, everyone. I'm really excited to be here today to provide a little bit of normalcy to a board meeting that is very, very different than our typical June meetings. I wanted to give you an update of of all things Avid throughout this past school year. We always like to start in Avid with our why. And I want to bring us back to our mission statement and us being really focused on closing that achievement gap so that all of our students can be college and career ready by the time that they leave our doors here at Dixon. I had the opportunity to come before this board twice this year to give you an update in terms of what we were planning to do in September, and also how our implementation was going back in January. Just a bit of background for those of you that may not have been here. All of our sites attended Avid Summer Institute in July of 2019. We had approximately 55 staff members, which was the biggest number that we had to date at Summer Institute. At that Summer Institute, all of our teams created implementation plans, and our elementary teams focused mostly around focused note-taking and organization and goal setting, with one of our sites focusing on collaborative structures and working with our students to learn how to work in groups in productive ways. What we typically do in Avid is we follow a cycle of continuous improvement. So at the end of every school year, we like to come back into phases 3 and 4, which are study and act. We study our plan, we look at how we did, and we plan for the next year. Our secondary teams also created a list of goals, and their goals included recreating a mission statement at C.A. Jacobs and increasing uses of Wicker strategies district-wide. That was very similar to the goals at Dixon High School. Additionally, even though Main Prairie High School did not have the opportunity to attend Avid Summer Institute last year, they did have a goal to start introductory professional development with the goal of becoming an Avid school-wide school this coming year, which I'm very happy to report we will do. So a little bit of a review on how things went this past year up until the closure. So in order to support all of these goals, we provided support to all of our teams. Before you have groups of teachers that are participating in different PD opportunities at Anderson Elementary and Gretchen Higgins. You see teachers at Anderson that participated in monthly mini PD sessions through their staff meetings. They focused on ways to support focused note-taking and reviewing samples of what focused notes really look like and how to implement them at the different grade levels, including kindergarten, because note-taking skills really begin when kids are 5 years old. When over at Gretchen Higgins, the site team took a more collaborative approach to sharing their collaborative structure. So you see our Avid coordinator leading the Gretchen Higgins staff in a PD, a mini PD during the staff meeting. And what they did is they adopted a strategy of the month where all of the teachers got to experience the learning as students, and then were able to go back into the classroom and implement the new strategies. That professional learning wasn't just present at Gretchen Higgins and Anderson Elementary. We also had a plan at Tremont where we focused on note-taking and really deepening those focused note-taking strategies with students across the board. We had planned 90-minute PD sessions for all staff after school. These PD sessions were optional, and we had a really great turnout of teachers. Unfortunately, our PD sessions were interrupted by the closure, but it's something that we will continue in the next year. Main Prairie High School, again, we engaged in monthly PD opportunities where we really focused on key school-wide strategies so that all of the staff could start aligning practices throughout the board so that students could focus on note-taking that would look the same whether they were in math or social studies or English. We also talked a lot about building relational capacities and building relationships with our students. C.A. Jacobs also engaged in a Wicker workshop where we looked at school-wide WICR strategies, again, to align practices. We had plans to do this on a monthly basis, and we started in February. Unfortunately, we shut down prior to our second PD session. And finally, Dixon High School, the Dixon High School team led CPTs focusing on the use of AVID school-wide strategies through their planning for the WASC accreditation visit. And we had planned to increase our CPT AVID PD, but it unfortunately didn't work out because of the closure. That definitely put a little bit of a pause. So I wanted to give you some evidence, some of the things that I was able to observe while out supporting our site. So what you have before you are samples from students. You have different organizational strategies for student binders. As you know, organizing materials can be difficult for some of our students, and if they cannot find their materials, they won't be very successful. So these are lists that were created by our teachers and housed in student binders so that the students could remain organized. You see them both in English and in Spanish because these were tools that were used to communicate with families. So students could bring this home, and the binder would act as a communication tool for the families. You also see a weekly log for some of our younger students. Our younger students didn't have binders. It would be very cumbersome for a kindergartner to carry around a 2 or 3 inch binder. So they had folders that were more grade appropriate. As I mentioned, focused note-taking was a big piece of our goals this year. And that was implemented throughout the grade levels in an age-appropriate way. The samples that you see before you are from kindergarten students, a first grade student, and a fourth grade student, and you see the progression of the notes. As a former high school teacher, this just warms my heart because I can't imagine where these students will be in terms of their note-taking skills and processing ability when they are in high school courses. And building those successful student skills is really what they need to be able to be college and career ready when they leave through the doors of our high school. So having the opportunity to start in kindergarten is an incredible opportunity. Now, focused note-taking was not only implemented in one subject, it was implemented in various subjects such as math. It was also implemented in different formats. Many of our teachers are early adopters of Google Docs, and they took the risk of using focused note-taking strategies in a Google Notes format to great success. So I really commend our teams for doing that. Another great success that we had were the collaborative strategies that some of our students tried. You see pictures of students working together in groups and using strategies to review and retell. Students are not naturally inclined to share their information or to process information orally without given very specific instructions. And AVID strategies really give us an opportunity to have that structure for kids to communicate in an academic way while elevating their discourse and collaborating with one another. You see in this video students engaging in a philosophical chairs activity where they are able to debate 2 different points in a respectful way. And the video is very animated. Unfortunately, I'm sorry, Ms. Mack, I couldn't get the sound to work very well. So I'm not going to be able to play the video, but in the video, you'll see the students, you would see the students debating using incredibly elevated language for 3rd grade class. So it was very, very exciting to see. Another update coming from Dixon High School, our Dixon High School elective program got the opportunity to take their students to 4 different college campuses. They took approximately 200 kids on 4 trips. They got to visit Sonoma State, Chico State, UC Berkeley, and St. Mary's College. Unfortunately, their last 2 trips were canceled due to COVID, but it was an incredibly successful field trip season. Nearly 100% of the AVID elective seniors were accepted into 4-year colleges, which is well above the national average for the national state average for AVID elective teams, and especially for overall school populations. Other successes at Dixon High School were the implementation of the school-wide agenda, a planner where students were expected to write their daily goals and their daily goals and homework. They also wrote the daily agenda for their classes. That served as a communication tool for the families as well, so students could clearly articulate what they were learning in each class. The AVID Student Council also met monthly to share their AVID experiences and discuss ways to support AVID students school-wide and promote the AVID school-wide culture. We had multiple guest speakers and presentations from our DHS College advisor. And the AVID Student Council organized the student picnic so that all students could meet and continue to develop relationships. Our Dixon High School site team is a very active group of educators who had the opportunity to meet monthly to discuss and implement AVID school-wide strategies prior to the closure, and after the closure. They supported staff in digital learning. We are going to continue to move forward in providing equitable and consistent organizational systems school-wide through, again, the members of the AVID site team. And some of those pieces will include having one binder and the daily use of a planner to have those daily objectives for every lesson, every single day. And finally, each staff meeting at Dixon High School this year started with a modeling of learning objectives and often incorporated Wicker strategies and lessons. And the Wicker cohorts that the teachers participated in were a way to gather cross-curricular data and experiences to create the WASC self-study document. Now, looking forward into 2021, this is typically the time where we will be talking about traveling to AVID Summer Institute. That's obviously not possible this year. So AVID has completely shifted gears and supported our teams in a different way. This year, instead of attending AVID Summer Institute, our teams will attend the AVID Digital Experience, or AVID Digital XP. The Digital XP is a synchronous PD opportunity that's very similar to Summer Institute, but all takes place in a format very similar to this. And my favorite part about this is that it includes a year-long community of practice. I've been working with the AVID program for quite some time, and the connections that I have made have proved invaluable in every role that I've ever had in education. What the participants of the AVID Digital XP will have the opportunity to do is to collaborate with job alikes in our region throughout the year. That's not something that we've been able to do in the past, and that's something that is included in the digital experience. The focus for our teams will be on digital teaching and learning. We don't know what the future holds, but what we do know is that we need to support our teams in delivering and designing quality distance learning and digital learning options for our students, whether we are in a face-to-face, hybrid, or distance learning model. I'm very excited to share that 35 of our staff members have signed up for the AVID Digital XP. You see the dates on the board. We have the flexibility of allowing our teams to attend at a date that works best for them. So we have different teams going at different dates. Many times when we go to AVID Summer Institute, the date that we choose really makes it difficult for our teams to all attend. And I think opening up this opportunity for them to attend in one of 8 different dates has been really beneficial. One really exciting piece of news that I got about an hour prior to the start of this meeting was that our district leadership team, our board members, our assistant superintendent, and our superintendent are invited to a one-day AVID leadership session during Digital XP. So after the meeting, you'll receive an invitation from me. And this is a training that Jewel and Mr. Dolan had the opportunity to attend last year. but it's in a digital format. The best part is also that community of practice, because you'll have the opportunity to share with other boards and other assistant superintendents and other superintendents from our area throughout the year, so that you can see what other systems are doing with Avid. So I would love if you would attend. It's a one-day synchronous experience, and I will send you the dates right after the meeting. Finally, our planning to continue to support our teams through 2020 and 2021 doesn't end with Avid Digital XP. Again, we didn't have the opportunity to go to Summer Institute, but we know we have to continue to support our teams in Avid implementation. So what we have done is we have planned in coordination with Avid Center, we have planned to have a district path. What that means is that we will bring Avid trainers to us rather than having our teams travel. The details and the dates are still to be determined pending the opening decisions. We don't know exactly when it will happen, but what we do know is that we will have different options for our teams. Our elementary teams will be able to focus on foundational Avid strategies and Avid implementation strategies like they did last year. The staff members that have already taken a Summer Institute will have a year 2 opportunity to deepen those strategies and those implementation plans. Finally, our secondary teams will have the opportunity to attend academic language and literacy training to better support our English learners in all content classes, and also a culturally relevant teaching strand to continue to foster and strengthen relationship with all of our students. So I'm really excited to say that Dixon will continue to support all of our students to be college and career ready. And I'm excited that all the schools at Dixon Unified will be Avid schools in this coming year. What questions do you have for me?
Thank you, Maria.
Before board questions, can you just talk a little bit about the CCI, which we've done back in the fall, and we were going to do it again here at the end of the year. Just remind everybody what that is and how we will pick up with that next year.
Is that the evaluation tool?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. I was going to ask about that, so you beat me to it. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Dolan. So yes, the CCI. The CCI is our evaluation tool for all Avid programs. Avid does not require that we fill it out twice a year, but luckily we did. Our team felt that waiting until May to fill out our evaluation document was far too late. So what we did is we started filling it out in November, completed it in December, and brought it to the board in January. Avid recommended that we not submit the CCI, but I politely declined the recommendation and we did it anyway. We don't have very many updates from the December draft. That is the same draft that we will be submitting to. Actually, we submitted it to Avid Center already, and I have copies of that available. I can send those your way. Essentially, we didn't move the needle much from the last time that we spoke, but we did have our goals in writing, and we will be planning for our areas of growth, the areas of growth that we identified in the CCI, we will be planning for in the coming year. One thing that I didn't mention was that I am also planning for an Avid Site Team Conference. Again, that is to be, the dates and the format are to be determined pending our reopening decisions. And what that means is when we typically go to Summer Institute, we have time to plan implementation and to make a site team plan. All of us come together in a room and make a roadmap for the year. Since we're going in a digital format and we're going at a different dates, that's very difficult to do. So what we're doing is I have gotten all of the materials from Avid Center, and I, along with our coordinators, will be leading our teams in creating those plans and connecting our findings from the CCI this year into the following year plan so that we're planning for those areas of growth.
Great, thank you. Any board questions? So Maria, when are we planning to do the CCI walkthrough, assuming we're able? Yeah, is it going to wait a while after we get going so that people can get back in the groove of things, or what?
What we typically do is start doing that work in November. So we have that continuous. I'm going to go back to our continuous improvement cycle. So we usually plan in the summer and early fall to address the areas in our CCI that have been identified as areas of growth. And once we identify those areas, we go into our due phase that usually takes place right at the beginning of the fall into the early winter. And that's when we start filling out our CCI. In the past, Avid required that we turn in our evaluation twice per year. When they shifted to a new model, they required it only once. I disagreed. I respectfully disagree with that decision. So I have instructed our teams to continue to do it twice a year, because waiting until May to really study what we're doing is more of an autopsy. So we'll start that in November, continue our cycle to complete it in December, and update in January. Now this will look different because we'll include the digital teaching and learning, strand that we take this summer, but it will continue in that cycle.
Is the digital teaching and learning going to help give ideas of using Avid strategies through distance learning?
That is the goal.
Okay.
That is the goal. That was very unclear this year on the how of Avid in a digital format. So much of it is so physical that it was very difficult for our teams to replicate. Digital teaching and learning is how you do Avid in a distance learning format. What I've seen so far is very encouraging. Jake Ritchell, our wonderful EdTech TOSA, has taken this strand and highly recommends it for our teams. So I'm really excited. I'll be taking it as well. I haven't taken it yet. And I'm actually took the summer off from working for Avid Center this year. So I haven't seen all of the syllabi, but the snapshots that I have gotten from my colleagues are very promising.
And Maria, just to jump in there, it certainly will obviously help with distance learning, but in a non-distance learning environment, it just is best practices with regard to using instructional technology. An area where we made a ton of growth this year, we're super proud of it, and we have a ton more to go. So it's, yeah.
Yes, thank you, Nick. And I think that's really key, is that digital teaching and learning strand existed prior to COVID. It has just grown since COVID, and it's applicable in any scenario that we reopen in.
Any other board questions? Okay, seeing none. Any public questions or comments?
Seeing none at this time.
Okay, thank you, Maria.
Thank you.
Yeah, I just want to add on to the thank you, Maria. We've had this build going on towards Avid implementation, which has been over a number of years here. And I think with the addition of Maria and her expertise and enthusiasm, she literally wears Avid over her heart. I noticed there this evening. Just really helping us with the implementation process. And we've been seeing people believing in Avid more and more. And Maria has certainly been a great add to the team in having that happen. Uniquely qualified in so many ways for this. So we're grateful. Thank you, Maria, and keep it up too. We know you will.
Right.
Okay. On to our last item, update on CTE TOSA position.
Yeah, I just wanted to. I was actually asked by one of the trustees just to bring this back for some clarification tonight. So this was a job description that you all approved, I believe, at the last board meeting. It may have been the meeting prior to that. In either case, it was at a recent meeting to create a TOSA position specifically to support our career tech ed work, most prominently at Dixon High School, but also some opportunities at the middle school and Main Prairie as we build it out. So there's a couple of things I want to point out. First is the need of this program. So as part of the board backup tonight, I attached the high quality CTE program evaluation, which really gets into how districts take a look at the work that they're doing in CTE as a way to try and get better. And where we really have a lot of need is building those partnerships within our community and making sure that our kids are leaving our programs either with industry recognized certificates or into programs. It's a big ask to ask a teacher with a full-time teaching load, and these are very specialized programs, to also go out and build all these partnerships out in the community. They've done a good job of that. I don't want to imply that they haven't, especially with the amount of time we've allotted to this, but this really will let us go to the next level. So after consulting, using the data that we generated from the rubric, we have a number of conversations with the high school administration. Feel like 0.4 FTE, or the equivalent of 2 class periods, was a good place for us to start, specifically to try and build up our progress on this particular rubric that's provided to us by the state. The questions come up, and I'll be blunt. We all saw the budget earlier tonight. How do we talk about adding new positions or something like that in these times? Fair question. These are very restricted funds. They can be used on these types of programs and these types of programs alone. This money is also in hand. This is not money that we're waiting on, or we might get. We have this money now and frankly need to spend it now. So we need to go there. I also had a question around what gives on this. Are we still going to be able to build out the farm, et cetera? The short answer to that question is yes. Certainly we would be able to buy, long term, we'd be able to buy something less if we're doing this. But I would argue that what our needs analysis is showing is not that we need more things, it's that we need more people dedicated doing this level of the work. So that was it. I just wanted to make sure I clarified with that, especially where those monies were coming from, as we look to build out what's really a critical program. This is not a dysfunctional program by any stretch of the imagination, but we know it can get better. Our teachers know it can get better, and this is a way to try and support it a little differently than we have in the past.
Okay, thank you, Nick. Any board questions? Seeing none. Any public questions or comments on this?
Yes, I have Julie Mustard first.
Go ahead, Julie.
Mr. Germani's probably saying, of course.
Go ahead, Julie.
Thank you for getting this there. It's been many, many years and a long time coming, and a lot of iterations, and great thing. Thank you.
Thank you for your support of all of our programs, Julie, but I know that our CTE program is near and dear to you, so thank you for that.
Thank you, Julie. Any other public comments or questions?
I had one. I had my hand up, so I don't know if I can go ahead with it.
Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted clarification, Nick. You said you had the money now and you needed to spend it now. Can you clarify why it needs to be spent now?
Yeah, so I mean, I don't want to create a false urgency, but we do have timelines on these funds. So I'll put it this way: we're tighter on those timelines now that I would prefer to be with the amount of money we need to spend. We still will spend these dollars by the time we need to. But I will say, yeah, I think sometimes we create these positions in the hopes that we'll get the grant to be able to do them. What I'm trying to say is that this money is already in the account. We have these dollars already. Likewise, CTEIG was a fund that I think had been marketed as something that was going to continue in perpetuity. And I think the first iteration of the May revise had this fund actually in subsequent years getting reduced pretty significantly. I don't know if that's where it will be. Even in that case, we have enough to certainly do this program for 1 year, and likely even a second year if we feel like it's something that's bearing fruit. I have a suspicion these sometimes are the types of investments that you make in people that actually pay for themselves with other grants or other opportunities with local businesses who want to come in and give to our programs. Those are the things that we're really looking to do with this. So, did I answer your question?
It did. I don't want it to sound like I'm not for good programs for kids. That's for sure. It's just, being the situation that we're in right now, adding a new position and wondering what the urgency at this time right now is for that position. So I think it just raises a few concerns.
Yeah. I'll say that, I hope I acknowledged it at the beginning. I will again. It looks funny if you think about it that way, and I completely understand why you and or anybody else would ask that particular question. I just would point out that the way we can use CTEIG dollars or Career Technical Education dollars, incentive grant dollars, is for CTEIG programs, and really there it becomes about, do you buy stuff for the programs or services for the programs, or can you, and that's typically what we've done, PD, you know, tractors in some cases, welding supplies, all those things are important, and we're not going to stop doing that. But you can also invest it strategically in FTE when it makes sense, and this is one of those chances to make sense.
Okay, thank you for clarification.
You got it.
Thanks, Susie. Any other public questions or comment?
Hey, Luke, when public comment is done, can I just make a comment on that?
Sure.
I'm seeing none at this time.
Okay, go ahead, Melissa.
I was just going to say I had the same concerns about us creating another position, but knowing that the dollars for that position come out of a certain fund that can only be used towards programs like this, I felt a lot better about it. And also my other question was, if we do this position, are we going to have enough money for all the supplies that are needed for the new farm? And the answer that I was told is yes. So I felt much better moving forward with this than I did when it first was presented.
Okay. All right, having no more public comment, let's move on to agenda items for future meetings. Lloyd, anything?
I have none, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Jewel, anything?
None for me.
Melissa?
No, I think I'm good.
Catlin?
No, thanks.
I don't either. Okay, board announcements. Do we have anyone that has a board announcement?
I would just say this, you know, just so all the community knows, like each of the board members, and I appreciate all of the work and time and effort that has been put in. Each week, we each have several committees that we're on to oversee all the different areas and all the different issues that we're having to deal with. And we care very much about doing reopening and safety precautions and teaching and learning the right way. And so we're all working very hard and being very vigilant about it. And so I just wanted to I think sometimes, I don't know if people really know what we do, but we are trying all to do our best. And so, and I just want to thank my fellow board members for all the time and effort that they put into that as well.
Anyone else?
I'm not a board member, but I will just say, I've started awarding, I've joked with you, a couple of you, and it just builds on Melissa's things. I'm awarding board bonus points for additional things, time and energy and responsibilities that we've asked you to take on here over the last couple of months. So I thank you for your work as well. And I just texted my team a minute ago. Thank you to all of them for all their great work. It's never been like this before. It'll hopefully never be like this again. But we've got, I think, as a governance team here with U5 and my team, we're doing the very best that we can with the best of intentions and that mission in mind. So thank you all.
Likewise, thank you to everyone, and also to all the teachers, all the employees, and all the parents and students out there. We're going to have some tough times to get through, and no one's going to be happy about it, but we've got to work as a team to make it through this, whether we're talking money or virus or what. So everyone keep working at it, and you know, we'll do our best. The board does care, as Melissa said, and we wouldn't be doing this if we didn't. Okay.
I'd like a comment too.
Yeah.
That I think it's absolutely fabulous that that people are trying to get on because we only have 100 slots. And to think that perhaps 300 people will be trying to get on and participate in the board meetings is a great tribute to our community, and it's wonderful to know that our community cares about the schools and what we're doing. And I want to thank you.
Yeah, who would have thought that would have been a problem, huh? Catlin, did you want to add anything? Okay. Okay, so coming events, July 2nd, special board meeting, July 16th, board meeting, July 30th, special board meeting. So we will be meeting. Do we have a motion to close this meeting?
I'll move.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye as well. Good night, everyone.
Thank you all. Good night.